CD 5.
Coral's breath caught in her throat at the sight of Declan Madison making his way in through the just-opened blue and gold iron gates. "Hello. Wow, when you said you were coming down today, I didn't realise you meant this early." Oh, but it was so nice to see him again. She knew he and Lily had been in regular contact, but when he'd called Lily yesterday to let them know he was coming, Coral's heart had done that skippity excited thing, and it had felt both thrilling and scary. But common sense had prevailed, as she'd decided after that sleepless night following his first visit. Since nothing could come of it, she was simply going to regard him as a practice run and enjoy the fact that her body was showing signs of coming back to life. Nick wouldn't mind, she was sure. He would approve. She greeted Declan with a kiss on the cheek and breathed him in, hopefully with enough discretion to ensure he didn't notice. "I'm early for a reason. Where's Lily?" "Driving a van load of parcels over to the depot. She'll be back by 10. We weren't expecting you before 11. "Okay, it'll be done by then." Declan checked his wristwatch, then glanced over at Marty, who was making himself a coffee in the office. "Do you have to be right here, or could Marty hold the fort for 40 minutes? Coral found herself transfixed by his gaze, by the something unspoken he seemed to be signalling to her with his dark-ringed, steel-grey eyes. For a microsecond, she wondered if Declan was suggesting that Marty might like to hold the fort while he whisked her upstairs to her bedroom for 40 minutes of wild, glorious, spectacular... No, of course that wasn't what he was suggesting. Honestly, what was happening to her? It was like all the hormones had woken up after 100 years and started going completely haywire. All of a fluster, she said. "Of course he can. Marty can hold anything." Good God, my hormones have turned into innuendo-laden teenagers. "I mean, it's fine, we're not busy. Most people don't start coming in until mid-morning. What is it you want?" Oh, phew. And there was that smile again. He really did have a way with him. Not to mention a girlfriend. "Come with me and I'll show you." As he spoke, Declan lightly touched her arm. "I'm in need of your expertise." The Valentine Hotel was just outside Stanton Langley. When you reached the traffic lights at the end of the high street and turned left onto Norton Road, the hotel was 500 metres further along on the right. As Declan pulled into the car park, the possibility that he'd booked a room for them bounced into Coral's head like an exuberant puppy. "Okay, stop this. Stop it right now. You're being ridiculous." The next second, she saw the sign next to the entrance announcing that the local estate agent was holding a property auction here today. There, see? Calm down, woman. Get a grip. The auction was taking place in the wedding room, complete with glittering chandeliers, full-length ivory silk curtains and light sprinklings of confetti on the polished oak parquet floor left over from last night's party. Most of the assembled bidders, by way of contrast, were a lot less glamorous. "This one," Declan murmured, pointing to the number in the catalogue. "Lily told me about it yesterday. What do you think?" They'd taken up positions at the back of the room. His warm breath in her ear was doing nothing whatsoever to calm Coral's heart rate. He was considering buying a house on the edge of the village. Right here in Stanton Langley. Oh, come on, idiot. He's a property developer. To do up and sell? Good idea. She bent her head over the catalogue so he couldn't see her face and realised she'd been thinking rogue thoughts. It's a bit of a mess, but easy enough to renovate. Old Malcolm lived there, but he died at Easter. Sad, but he was 93. And do you know any of these people? Declan discreetly indicated the rest of the room. I'm the outsider here. Any information gratefully received. He was wearing the same aftershave as before. It smelled delicious on his skin. Gathering herself, Coral glanced around. The 3 men standing by the door are builders, she whispered. The tall woman in the red shirt runs a holiday lettings business. Those 2 over there are a husband and wife team who do buy-to-let. And the skinny guy at the front works for his dad. They're in property development too. Thanks. I don't know any of the others. That's fine. If I'm bidding with them, can't go too far wrong. It's the one-off buyers who fall in love with somewhere and get carried away that you don't want to go up against. Coral nodded, impressed by his professional attitude. Do you get butterflies when you're bidding? Declan shook his head. I've been doing it for too long. That doesn't happen anymore. I'm used to it. Of course he would be by now. Gosh, he was so cool. Lily saw Declan and Coral making their way into the yard. There you are! Where have you two been? Hello. Declan greeted her with a hug. Sorry, there was just a little something I needed to do. What kind of something? Said Lily, because he was looking incredibly pleased with himself. He held up a bunch of keys on a cheap plastic keyring. Just bought a house? She stared at him. What? Weaver's cottage. Coral was grinning. Oh my God, that's amazing! Lily let out a shriek of delight. You actually did it! You were right about it, said Declan. It has real potential. He jangled the keys. I'm heading back over there now. Oh, this is exciting. Can I come and have a look at it with you? We're not busy here. She looked at Coral. Is that okay? Go on, said Coral. It's fine. Declan said, Brace yourself, though. The rooms are very purple. But when they reached the cottage, all the work that needed doing seemed straightforward enough. Having been assured by Coral that Dempsey's was the best local building contractor by far, Declan had approached Bill Dempsey at the auction and arranged to meet him at the property. Within 20 minutes, as they made their way through the brightly painted rooms, discussing ideas and taking pages of notes and measurements, he'd hired Bill to do the work that needed to be done. 10 minutes after that, he'd put calls through to the best local landscape gardener, the best painter and decorator, and the best kitchen fitters in the area. Blimey, said Lily, impressed. You don't hang about, do you? Ah, well, time is money. Declan looked amused. Lily pointed to the narrow window at the side of the cottage, which had no view to speak of but would get the sun in the morning. You could use stained glass in that frame. Can you find some for me? Said Declan. Definitely. Or there's a guy in Chipping Norton who makes it. You could commission your own design. And this could be Coral wanting me to get back. It wasn't Coral. When Lily saw who was calling, she said, Oh, let me just take this, and slipped outside, leaving Declan and Bill to discuss lintels and stripped-out door frames. Hi, said Eddie Tesla. Calling me again in the middle of the night? More jet lag? Maybe, but I'm about to solve that problem. Her ear was still tingling from the sound of his voice. And how are you planning on doing that? By flying back to the place whose time zone I'm compatible with. What are you up to tomorrow night? Caught off guard, Lily said, You're coming back to Stanton Langley? Oh, God, what a stupid thing to say. Of course he wasn't doing that. Eddie laughed and she felt even more ridiculous. Not quite, but I'm flying into Heathrow. Now listen, would you be free? She proceeded with caution. To do what? You told me the other week you'd always fancied the idea of going to a movie premiere, remember? I remember, and you said they were boring. And you said maybe I thought they were boring because I was a miserable old sod. Oh yes, she did remember coming out with something along those lines. Lily batted away a hovering wasp and said, Bit rude of me, sorry about that. No problem. So how about it? How about what? She held her breath. No way was she about to jump to conclusions and make a twit of herself twice in 2 minutes. I'm going to the premiere of Catcher in Leicester Square tomorrow night. Patiently, he spelled it out for her. You told me you'd always wanted to go to a premiere, so would you like to come along with me to this one? Ask a silly question. Seriously, I'd love to. You mean I'd actually get to walk along the red carpet? Oh, wow, this was thrilling. No, I just sneak you in through the back door. What? Disappointed, Lily said. Oh, right. Kidding, said Eddie. Of course you'd be on the red carpet. But I'm warning you now, people will want to know who you are. That's okay. It's not as if they'll be interested once they find out I'm a nobody. God, thanks so much for inviting me, though. What time does it start and finish so I can book my train tickets? Hey, no need. I'll send a car to pick you up around 3 if that's okay, and book you into a hotel for the night. Do you have to be at work the next day? Lily pictured the works diary pinned up in the office. Yes, I do. I'd need to be back by 10:30? Fine, we'll arrange that then. And I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. What are you going to do with your hair? What was she going to do with her hair? Her hand, moving instinctively to her head, encountered a sticky clump of old spider's web from where they'd explored the dusty attic of Weaver's cottage. "I'll probably wash it," she said. He laughed. "Are you going to enjoy yourself at the premiere?" "Are you serious? Of course I am." "In that case," Eddie's tone was genial, "I promise I will too." Chapter 23. Casually dropping the news into conversation in front of Dan was, needless to say, the best bit of all. They'd already booked a table at the Star that evening so that Declan could meet Patsy, Sean and Will. Then Dan had ended up tagging along too. Well, limping along, what with him being incapable of preparing his own food, and the weather had been warm enough for them all to eat outside in the pub garden beneath the trees strung with silver fairy lights and hanging jars of citronella candles. Watching them, Lily glowed with happiness at the way the group had so effortlessly expanded to include Declan. Everyone liked him, and he, in turn, was getting on with each of them. As darkness fell and the stars came out, stories and memories continued to be swapped. Dan, refilling their glasses with wine, said, "When I was 5 or 6, I remember Lily's mum explaining to me how a pulley system worked. She threw a rope over one of the low branches of the ash tree in our garden to show me. Then she went into the house and I tied the rope around Lily's waist and tried to haul her up into the tree." "Except you let go and dropped me and I landed splat on the ground," Lily protested amidst collective laughter at the memory. "All my growing up years, you kept coming up with brilliant new ways to torture me, and I never had the chance to get my own back because I was always 2 years younger than you." Dan clapped his good hand to his chest in disbelief. "Are you kidding me? Are you actually serious? You were always getting your own back on me. What about the time I fell asleep on the sofa before my first date with Cara Mason, and you drew giant eyelashes on my face with felt pen?" "Oh yes, that had been brilliant. You couldn't have been that excited about the date if you could fall asleep 2 hours beforehand. Plus," Lily reminded him, "it's not my fault you woke up and went out to meet her without even bothering to look in the mirror first." "Why would I look in the mirror?" He mimed confusion. "I'm not a girl." Patsy joined in, giving him a nudge. "And there was that time I was too busy to cut your hair, so Lily offered to do it instead. Remember that?" Dan shuddered. "How could I forget? She actually made me believe she could do it." Lily grinned. "That was to pay you back for telling everyone on the school bus I was wearing my first ever bra." "What?" Dan did a double take. "Hang on, that was when you were 12. The haircutting thing happened a whole year later." "And do you remember how long all the boys made fun of me by twanging the backstrap of my bra? They carried on doing it for months," said Lily. "Anyway, I got my revenge in the end and it was worth the wait." "What about the time we went on that school trip to the water park?" Dan's dark eyes glinted in the reflected candlelight as he shook his head sorrowfully at her. "I still don't know how you managed it, but I know it was you who swapped my swimming trunks for a bikini." "I have no idea why you would think it was me." A decade on from that triumphant occasion, Lily gave him an innocent smile. It had actually involved creeping into his house the night before and replacing the trunks in his sports bag with the old-fashioned pink bikini she'd bought for 50p from a charity shop. Coral said, "Unless it was to pay Dan back for that rumour he spread about you having a big crush on Moggy Blake." "Oh, Moggy!" Lily groaned at the memory of the boy who'd smelled of cat wee and followed girls around meowing at them. The idea that she could secretly be lusting after him had been mortifying at the time. "You know you loved him, really," said Dan. Lily threw a French fry across the table at him. "You were a nightmare. You still are." Dan picked the French fry off the front of his shirt and ate it. "So you're the one who hid my bicycle up a tree, yet I'm the nightmare." "You two are like a double act," said Declan. "Seriously, you're Tom and Jerry." Everyone burst out laughing. "That's what Mum used to call us," Lily explained, "all the time." "I was Tom," said Dan. "She was Jerry, mainly on account of her enormous ears." "I was Jerry because I was smaller," Lily retorted, "and because I don't have fleas." "Don't worry," said Patsy. "They're always like this. They love each other, really." "In a non-physical sense," said Lily. "I'm not that stupid." Lily prefers film stars these days. Dan's tone was playful. If they're thousands of miles away and give her a quick call, that pretty much makes her day. Lily suppressed a yelp of triumph because she'd known he wouldn't be able to resist mentioning Eddie and making fun of her silly crush on him. It had almost killed her not mentioning it earlier, but now that Dan had done the honours, she could go ahead. And again, totally worth the wait. Savouring the moment and taking a sip of ice-cold wine, she gave Dan the benefit of the insouciant smile she'd practised earlier in front of the mirror. Actually, he's been in touch again. Ha! And this time she hadn't blurted it out like a small child incapable of keeping a secret for more than 2 minutes. Oh yes, being insouciant was definitely the way to go. He has? Did he send you another text? Dan's eyes were bright with mischief. Was it definitely from him, or did he get his assistant to do it? So smug. So smug. Lily idly tipped her wineglass this way and that, and then said casually, "Oh no, it was definitely his voice on the phone. He's flying back to the UK this evening. The reason he called was to invite me to London tomorrow night." Ha! Ha! 15 love to me. Dan had been lounging back on his chair. Now his shoulders stiffened. Oh? To do what? He asked me to go along with him to the premiere of Catcher in Leicester Square. 30 love. So exciting, Coral exclaimed. Have you decided yet what you're going to wear? Either the yellow dress with the beading or the red one. It wasn't as if she had many to choose from. Oh, the red is lovely, said Patsy. That's my favourite. Mine too, but we'll be on the red carpet. It might make me, you know. Lily gestured down at herself. A bit invisible? Catcher's set in the future, said Dan. You don't like films set in the future. That doesn't matter, Coral told him. It's a premiere. There'll be all sorts going on. How will you get home afterwards? Dan put his drink down on the table. He's booked a hotel. 40 love. And a car to get me there and back. Unable to resist it, Lily added, well, a limo. Of course he has. Gone was Dan's air of mischief. In the dim light and with his narrowed dark eyes and shadowed cheekbones, he now resembled Mr. Darcy, being all disapproving and taut-jawed. Fantastic. Game, set, and match. I can't wait, said Lily. It's going to be amazing. Just don't... Dan stopped himself in his tracks and exhaled. Just don't forget to have fun? Lily beamed triumphantly at him. Don't worry, I won't. Dan and Patsy had departed, as had Sean and Will. With just the three of them left, they'd headed next door to Goldstone House. Declan had been finishing his coffee when Lily brought downstairs the box containing all the birthday letters from her mother. When he'd finished reading them, Declan had to gather himself for a moment before he was able to speak. Finally, he said, Thank you for showing them to me. I wanted you to see them. Lily was winding a length of curly ribbon from the box around her index finger. Aren't they good? Declan nodded slowly, because they were better than good. Jo had taken care to make each letter appropriate to the age Lily would have been when she read it for the first time. As she'd grown up, so the words and sentences had grown longer. Her voice is so clear in them, he marvelled. I can hear her saying every word. I know, Coral smiled. We all can. In one of the earlier letters, Jo had said, Darling Lily, I know you'll always be happy with Coral and Nick. They love you so much, to the moon and back. And maybe one day they'll have a baby of their own, then you can all be happy together. Oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? Am I allowed to ask, or is it too personal? Declan lightly tapped the relevant letter and looked at Coral. You didn't have any other children. It was a highly personal question, but somehow it seemed safe to ask it tonight. Coral smiled briefly. We tried, but it just never happened. Maybe we could have tried harder, investigated other avenues, but we had Lily, so somehow it didn't seem as important. Thanks to this one. She affectionately touched Lily's shoulder. We weren't desperate. She was Jo's gift to us. She was ours, and she was enough. Their eyes met across the table, and Declan said gently, That's good. How about you? Said Coral. Did you ever want children? They were already aware that he didn't have any of his own. Declan said, I lived with a lovely woman 15 years ago. We were together for 4 years. We tried for a family. Meg got pregnant and she miscarried. He hesitated, then said, Twice. Both times at 10 weeks. Oh, I'm sorry, that must have been awful, said Lily, for both of you. It was a rough time, Declan admitted. Meg was devastated. We broke up a year after the second miscarriage. The good news is, I heard through friends that she married an Italian guy and went on to have healthy twin boys. He shrugged. I'm happy for her. Not so easy, though, is it? There were sympathetic tears in Coral's eyes. It was a long time ago. I'm used to it now. Finishing the last mouthful of coffee, Declan said, Life goes on. It was 1:30 in the morning by the time Declan arrived back in Notting Hill. When he saw the lights on in the house, he knew Gail had come over and let herself in and was waiting for him. Well, either that or the burglar had forgotten his torch. When he climbed the stairs and pushed open the bedroom door, she was sitting up in his bed. Hi, said Declan. Darling, I'm sorry. She closed her laptop and placed it on the bedside table. Her long hair gleamed in the flattering lamplight and she was wearing an elegant pistachio silk nightdress. What can I tell you? I was having a tough day at work. Everyone else was being an idiot and I wanted to yell at them, but I couldn't. Then I got your text and I took it out on you. Right. I guessed it might have been something like that. Declan kept his tone neutral. When she'd messaged him earlier to ask where he was, he told her Stanton Langley without elaborating further. The reply had come flying back. Sounds to me like you'd far rather be there than here. It's been nice knowing you. Goodbye. This message had come through at 3 o'clock while he'd been at Weaver's cottage meeting with the kitchen fitter recommended to him by Coral. He'd switched off his mobile without replying. Come here. Gail held out her toned arms, beckoning him closer. I didn't mean it. You do know I didn't mean it, don't you? Declan hesitated, then nodded. There were unshed tears shimmering in her eyes, and she was silently pleading with him for forgiveness, which wasn't something that came naturally to her. I do. Listen, there's nothing to worry about. I met Lily and her friends and family. I liked them all. But I like Stanton Langley too. It's a fantastic place. If you saw it, you'd understand what I'm talking about. Gail was nodding along enthusiastically as he said it, eager to make amends. I will, I'd like to. So you went there today to see Lily and the village. It'd be great to meet her. We could go down next weekend. Fine, we'll do that. I bought a property there this morning. That took her aback. You did? It's my job. I went along to the auction and snapped it up. He shrugged. It's a great investment. To live in? Not to live in. He shook his head. She knew he'd often talked about one day leaving London and moving out to Kent or maybe Berkshire. As a committed city dweller herself, the idea was anathema to her. So just something to do up and sell on? She looked relieved. I haven't decided yet. Either sell it on or add it to the portfolio and let it out. If you did want to come and see it for yourself, you could tell me what you think. I will. And I'm sorry about earlier. Gail reached for him and pulled his face down to hers for a kiss, then patted the mattress beside her. It's late. Come to bed. I'm pretty tired, said Declan before she could get any ideas. Here, I took some photos of the cottage. He handed her his phone and began to unbutton his shirt. Looks pretty run down. Gail scrolled through the pictures. She'd never been particularly interested in his career. If it weren't, Declan explained, I wouldn't be buying it. See those views over the valley? That's the money shot right there. You'll never lose on a place with views like that. And this is Lily and her friends. Already bored with photos of peeling purple wallpaper and unevenly plastered ceilings, Gail was scrolling further on through the gallery. Seems like a nice place wherever it is. We had dinner in the garden of the local pub, the Star Inn. They all look great too. Keen to make up for her earlier strop, she was now being extra magnanimous. So that's the women who adopted her, yes? Carol. Coral. Right, and the brunette? That's Patsy, she's a hairdresser. She used to babysit when Lily was small and they've been close ever since. And this one? Gail pointed to Dan. Is he Lily's boyfriend? No, they're just friends. He's Patsy's younger brother. He's very good looking. And knows it. Declan climbed into bed. He's an airline pilot. Oh, Dan, hairdresser. Raising her palms in despair, Gail said, I completely forgot. I've got an appointment at Fen Lomax next Saturday afternoon. Well, you can always call him and cancel, said Declan. Patsy has her own salon in Stanton Langley. I'm sure she could fit you in while we're down there. Gail threw back her head and barked with laughter. You mean I should cancel my appointment with Fen Lomax and let some village hairdresser loose on my hair instead? Oh, darling, ha ha ha. This is why I love you so much. Chapter 24. Lily couldn't stop gazing out through the tinted window of the limousine. Leicester Square was packed, ablaze with lights and buzzing with anticipation. The red carpet stretched ahead of them like a river, cordoned off from the fans squashed up against the metal barriers. There were TV cameras and reporters and security staff with earpieces and walkie-talkies milling about. Well, said Eddie next to her on the back seat. What do you think? It looks just like it does on the telly. Look at all the people. He smiled. That's kind of the point. If there's a film premiere but nobody turns up to see the stars arrive, did it ever really happen? I knew it'd be busy, said Lily, but I didn't think it'd be this busy. Ah, well, it helps that it isn't raining. Are you ready? He added as the car moved up a few feet towards the head of the queue. We're next. Oh, wow, surreal or what? The gleaming black chauffeur-driven car had collected them from the hotel just a few streets away, then crawled through the rush-hour traffic to bring them here, despite the fact it would have been 5 times quicker to walk. And now it was drawing to a halt at the head of the queue, and the door was being opened. Lily took a deep breath to quell the butterflies and smoothed down the skirt of her favourite red dress to ensure she wasn't about to flash her knickers to the world. A dazzle of flashbulbs went off and she blinked, then blinked again as Eddie intertwined his fingers with hers. The photographers were calling out his name, even as a female organiser with a clipboard was shepherding them towards the press pen. You wait here with me for a minute, the organiser murmured, resting her hand on Lily's forearm. Let them get their shots of Eddie. Eddie had to stand in front of a giant backdrop featuring logos of the film and various companies advertising the event. He was wearing a gorgeously cut dark blue suit and cream shirt, and his hair was slicked back from his tanned face. Lily had never seen him looking so smart and so much like a film star. Watching him now was making her stomach go a bit squiggly, if she was honest. After a minute or two, he beckoned for her to join him, and the female organiser moved across to lead her over. What's your name, love? One of the photographers called out. Lily shook her head. It's okay, I'm no one. Come on, tell us who you are, said another man. The organiser gave her a distracted nod. It's okay, you can tell 'em. Giving her permission, imagine that. My name's Patsy, said Lily just for fun. And it was fun, because the photographers instantly began calling out, This way, Patsy! Over here, Patsy! Patsy, give us a smile! Out of the corner of her mouth, Lily said to Eddie, This is the craziest thing. His arm was around her waist, his hip brushing against hers. Enjoying having your photo taken? Oh, yes, although I do know I'm going to end up getting cropped out of 99% of them. He tilted his head closer to hers and murmured, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remember to keep calling you Patsy. Lily grinned at him. Don't worry, I'll change it in a minute. Can you hear all those girls over there screaming your name? I can now you've said it. We'll have to go along the carpet in a minute. Right. The officious organiser checked her stopwatch and signalled that it was indeed time for them to move on. All done here. The next arrivals were emerging from their limos, ready to take their place in front of the backdrop. As the slow journey along the red carpet began, the flashes from the professional photographers' elaborate cameras became interspersed with those from the overexcited fans' mobile phones. Lily hung back while Eddie chatted to those behind the barriers and allowed himself to be photographed with them. Will you sign me here? A big girl in a plunging t-shirt handed him a black felt-tip pen and patted the area above the low-cut top. She gazed at Eddie adoringly as he scrawled an autograph across her chest. When he'd finished, she said, "I'm going to get that done as a tattoo tomorrow. Oh my God, I just love you so much." "I don't think you should have it tattooed there." Lily couldn't help herself. She had to say it. As a signature, it wasn't even legible, for heaven's sake. "Who asked you?" The overweight girl shot her an insolent stare. "I don't give a toss what you think." Eddie had moved on to have a selfie taken with the squealing group. Lily noticed that the overweight girl's jacket pocket was moving. She pointed. "What have you got in there?" The girl stiffened. "My mouse? What's it to you? I can bring my mouse with me if I want." Honestly, so defensive. "I didn't say you couldn't. What's his name?" "Snowball." Lily smiled. "I used to have a mouse when I was younger." "What was yours called?" "William." "That's a stupid name for a mouse." "I know. I don't know what I was thinking. Can I have a look at Snowball?" "No." The girl shook her head, then leaned across the barrier and lowered her voice. "I don't want people to see him and start screaming. I might get kicked out." "Good point." Lily nodded sympathetically. "I once took William along to our school nativity play and got sent off the stage." The girl managed a faint smile. "Are you Eddie's girlfriend?" "No, I'm not." "Are you an actress?" "No." Lily hesitated. Eddie was waiting for her, ready to move on to the next group. "Listen, don't get his name tattooed on your chest. It'll be there for the rest of your life." The girl's expression changed. "Oh, don't start that again. I want it to be there for the rest of my life." "But when you have a boyfriend, he might not like seeing someone else's name on his girlfriend's chest." The girl shrugged. "I'm never going to get a boyfriend anyway. Boys don't fancy me." "Come along, you need to catch up with Eddie." Steering Lily firmly on, the organiser whispered, "We need to keep going. Thought I'd come and rescue you." "She wants to have Eddie's signature tattooed on her chest. I was trying to persuade her not to." "Ah, well, not our problem." The organiser was more concerned with keeping everyone moving to make way for Mira Knowles, the star of the show. It was hard not to keep turning round and stealing glances at Mira Knowles, although being on the red carpet presumably meant being too cool to do so. In her mid-30s, Mira had been acting in films since childhood and was proper Hollywood royalty. Tonight, with her hair in an intricate dark chignon and wearing a stunning full-length dress covered in tiny iridescent pearls, she radiated Ice Queen glamour. Having waved to the fans but not stopped to speak to them, she was now being interviewed by a TV crew. "And what's your name?" "Sorry?" Lily belatedly realised someone was addressing her. "Oh, I'm no one. I'm just here with Eddie." The male journalist was holding a microphone. "You must have a name, though." "I'm Coral, but I'm not his girlfriend," said Lily. "And who are you wearing?" "This? It's vintage. Dior, I think." Could she be sued for telling such an outrageous lie? Whoops, and now the girl with him was photographing her. Hurriedly, Lily said, "Actually, it's not Dior, it's New Look." "Oh dear," the young journalist sniggered. "You really are no one." Lily shrugged and said, "I told you." "Don't be so rude." The photographer rolled her eyes at the journalist. "Nothing wrong with a bit of New Look." "So, Coral, do you wish you were Eddie's girlfriend? Bet you do," said the journalist. "I don't," said Lily. "He snores." OK, shouldn't have said that either. Embarrassed, Lily looked away and found herself glancing over again at Mira Knowles. The next moment she noticed something tiny and determined making its way at top speed across the red carpet in the direction of "Ah!" If the shriek was ear-splitting, the leap into the air that accompanied it was frankly impressive. Mira Knowles screamed again as she began hopping around in terror. With every hop, the likelihood of her spearing the mouse with a stiletto increased. And somehow, no one else had spotted the cause of the kerfuffle. Lily, only 3 or 4 meters away, launched herself in some kind of rugby tackle dive, and with her arms stretched out in front of her, managed to grab the petrified mouse in the nick of time. She snatched it from beneath Mira's lethal high heels and rolled sideways, clutching Snowball to her chest. "Ark, has it gone? Has it really gone? Oh my God, that was so disgusting. Mira shuddered with revulsion, then let out another high-pitched scream as one of the security guards hauled Lily to her feet a bit too vigorously, and for a moment she lost her balance, stumbling towards the actress with the mouse clasped in her hands. Okay, that wouldn't be clever, tipping Snowball headlong into Mira Knowles' fabulous cleavage. Balance regained, Lily said, "It's fine, I'll get him away from you." She turned, searching the crowds behind the barrier, and saw the girl with Eddie's autograph scrawled across her chest. The girl was pale with anguish as Lily handed Snowball over to her, though not before the mouse had done a little wee in her hand. Well, it had been a stressful experience for him, almost getting skewered by a Jimmy Choo. He didn't get hurt, luckily. Lily gave Snowball's tiny head a stroke and shot the girl a meaningful look. The girl flushed, caught out. "I thought Mira would be fine with him. When she plays characters in films, she's always really brave, never scared of anything." "You thought she'd pick Snowball up and bring him back to you, and then she'd talk to you about him. Was that the plan?" "Maybe. Kind of." Another idea that wasn't so great. Lily felt sorry for her. "Listen, how about getting the tattooist to trace the signature and put it somewhere else on your body? Would you at least have a think about it?" The girl hung her head for a second, then said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that. And make sure Snowball doesn't escape again." "He won't." It wasn't until Lily turned to make her way back to Eddie that she realised quite how many people were now taking photos of her. Flash, flash, flash went the lights, dazzling her for a moment until Eddie, grinning, reached for her hand. "You were like the SAS, throwing yourself at Mira's feet like that. Talk about impressive." "I thought she was going to stamp on it and kill it." "She nearly did." His grin broadened. "You're a real mice saver." "Everyone's looking at me." Lily was finding it an unsettling experience, being the object of so many people's attention. "Now I know what it's like for you," she said ruefully. "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" "Both." "You're probably going to be on the front page of the tabloids tomorrow." "Was that the good or the bad?" Lily searched his face for clues. "And?" "When you did your SAS thing and launched yourself across the carpet, your dress flew right up at the back." "Oh." "Oh." Lily sighed. "Just my luck. Did everyone see my knickers?" "Not quite. You had about an inch to spare." He grinned. "But it's a relief to know you were wearing some." "Wow, just imagine." "Come on," said Eddie. "Don't worry about it. Mira wants to see you, and I'm sure all the journalists are going to be desperate for a word, too." He led her over to Mira. "Here she is, then." And indeed, here she was. "Hey, it's a scene stealer!" exclaimed Mira Knowles. "Sorry." Lily inwardly cursed her own Britishness. Mira smiled her a dazzling film star smile. Up close, her teeth were nothing short of astonishing, and said, "I'm kidding. You rescued me, and I'm so grateful. My whole life I've been petrified of little scuttly things, and mice are like the scuttliest. You were so brave doing that, catching it in your hands." She shuddered at the mere thought. "Ugh, so gross. Anyhow, thank you for saving me." "No problem. I like mice." Lily was still hyper-aware of the cameras upon her, the journalists attempting to attract her attention, people murmuring to each other, "Who is she?" And other people replying, "Her name's Patsy somebody or other." Whereupon other voices said, "No, it's not. She's called Coral." "Could we have some pictures of the three of you together?" In response to the photographers, the organiser was making squeeze-up gestures with her splayed hands. The next moment, Lily found herself with Eddie on one side of her and Mira Knowles on the other. It was like being in a film star sandwich, and Mira had her arm around her waist. Somewhere over to the left, she heard a voice say, "Did we get this shot with her skirt flying up?" And the reply, "Yup." Then a camera crew approached them, and a reporter was saying, "Mira, how are you feeling after that close encounter?" "Grateful towards my rescuer. She's my new best friend." As she said it, Mira clasped Lily's hand and gave it a best friend squeeze. This probably wasn't the moment to tell her it was also the hand Snowball had done a panicky wee on. "Hey, Coral, turn this way." "Patsy, over here." The organiser gave her an odd look and said, "Which one are you?" "Neither," said Eddie. "She's Lily." Oh, you're Lily, Mira exclaimed, turning her headlight gaze on her. I didn't realise. Eddie's told me all about you. Once the film was over, Mira said, So what are you two up to now? I was planning to take Lily out to dinner, said Eddie. I've booked a table at... Oh, don't do that. No, Mira protested, clutching Lily's hand again. I'm hungry, though. Lily was torn. Aren't you hungry? Are you serious? Look at me. Mira indicated her whippet-thin waist and hips. I spent my whole life hungry. But we don't have to go out, do we? We're all at the same hotel, so why don't we have dinner in my suite? Well... Eddie wasn't sounding enthusiastic. Oh, please, Mira begged. My driver's waiting out back. He can take us there now. I'll die of boredom if you two don't keep me company. Come on, she reiterated, intertwining Lily's fingers with her own. Say yes, it'll be fun. Chapter 25. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and Eddie Tesler was marvelling at the way the seduction he'd organised with such care had spectacularly failed to go according to plan. The more time he'd spent with Lily the other week, the more he'd liked her. Everything about her, in fact. Her quirky character appealed to him. She was funny and bright, and with those huge brown eyes and that riot of curly golden hair, she almost resembled a cartoon. She was also pretty, but remarkably unvain, which was a draw. For the last couple of years, he felt as if all he'd encountered was girls obsessed with how they looked, from their acrylic nails to their fake tans. So when he'd called to invite her along to this evening's premiere, he'd have been lying if he'd said he wasn't interested in getting to know her better and moving their relationship to the next level. When a 25-year-old girl still lived at home with the person who was effectively her mother, it created a certain dilemma. Bringing her up to London had been intended to overcome that problem. He'd envisaged a romantic dinner à deux, a deepening of the attraction between them, an even more romantic moonlight walk along the glittering banks of the Thames as they made their way back to the hotel, followed by maybe one last glass of champagne in the bar before they headed, hand in hand, up to either his room or hers. What he hadn't counted on was having this carefully planned sequence of events banjaxed by an A-list actress with a low boredom threshold and a profound love of word games. Worse, it was pretty much his own fault. When he and Mira had been over in LA last week promoting the US release of Catcher, he'd found himself telling her all about Lily. He'd also stressed how natural and unaffected she was, and how utterly trustworthy she'd been, keeping the secret of his stay at Stanton Langley when so many others wouldn't have been able to resist giving it away. This had been a particular draw for Mira, who'd been famous for so much longer than he had. To be reassured that you could allow yourself to relax completely in the company of someone and not worry that they might be indiscreet was a wonderful feeling, and once Lily had said to her, "Don't worry, I don't blab," Mira's relief had been palpable. Then Mira had mentioned her passion for Scrabble, and that had been it, because it transpired that Lily loved Scrabble too. For the next 2 hours they'd all drunk whiskey and gossiped and played a demon match narrowly won by Lily, who'd then gone on to introduce them to another game called Word Squares that had had Mira entranced. More whiskey and laughter and boisterous debates ensued. Undeniably, it had been a great evening, but to say it hadn't been the kind Eddie had been looking forward to was something of an understatement. "Oh, God, we've finished the whiskey!" Lily was now pointing with disbelief at the empty bottle on the table. "It's fine, doesn't matter," Mira assured her. "We can call room service and get some more." Lily shook her head a bit wildly, her ringlets bouncing around her shoulders like springs. No, we don't want more. I mean, we've finished all that whiskey, and I have to be up in 5 hours to go to work, and I'm not even a whiskey-drinking person." "Well, you should be." Mira had long ago kicked off her shoes and changed out of her pearl-encrusted evening dress into a camisole top and shorts. "You drink it very well." Lily grinned. "Thank you. I didn't know until tonight that I liked it." "Call it my gift to you. I taught you to enjoy whiskey, and you taught us to play word squares." "I should go to bed." Yes, we should, thought Eddie. "Oh no, just one more game, please," Mira begged. "I want to beat your best score." "You won't beat it." Lily shook her head pityingly. 43 is a magnificent score. Mira bounced up and down on the sofa. Let me try. I love this game so much. Go on then, one last game. Draw your squares, said Lily, stifling a yawn. But after this, I really need to go to sleep. Hang on, quick bathroom break. Leaping to her feet, Mira held up a skinny index finger. I'll be back in 1 minute. It took Eddie less than 40 seconds to fetch a bottle of iced water from the minibar in the next room, but by the time he returned, Lily had already reached her limit. The notepad and pen were still resting in her lap, her bare legs were curled up beneath her, and her head had fallen to one side. Her eyes were closed, her mouth was very slightly open, her breathing slow and regular. She was fast asleep. Back from the bathroom, Mira stared in dismay. Oh man, what did you let her do that for? Eddie shook his head. I didn't. I just went to get a drink. The next second she was out for the count. Well, that's no good. Wake her up. I want another game. Mira was accustomed to having her every whim instantly catered for. Eddie said, She's wiped out. I'll get her to her room. Then will you come back and play word squares with me? Their body clocks were both messed up after having just flown over from LA. Eddie wasn't tired either. Just disappointed. He said, I'm pretty shattered too. Going to call it a night. A night devoid of sex, thanks to you. You're no fun, Mira complained. That means I'm going to have to call Monty, get him over here to play word squares. Monty was the long-suffering personal assistant who travelled everywhere with Mira and would be fast asleep right now. You do that, said Eddie. I'm sure he won't mind at all. He bent down, put the pen and paper on the silver embossed coffee table and gently hauled Lily to her feet. Come on, I'm taking you to your room. Lily's eyes half opened and she nodded. Okay. Bye, sweetie. I totally forgive you for crashing out on me. Mira had already called Monty's number and was waiting impatiently for him to pick up. Bye. Lily's dark lashes flickered as she leaned against Eddie's side and allowed him to help her out of the suite. In his left hand, he carried her shoes and evening bag. She smelled of whiskey and shampoo and the chocolate they'd devoured between them from the minibar. Finally, they reached their rooms, adjacent to each other. Eddie found Lily's keycard in her bag and pushed open the door for her. I'm so tired, Lily whispered, placing her arms around his neck. Her eyes still 3/4 closed, she gave him a clumsy kiss on the cheek. So tired. Thanks for everything. I can't believe I played Scrabble with Mira Knowles. And with me, Eddie reminded her. He was clearly second best. She nodded in agreement. Sorry, I'm with you. Resting her face against his chest, she yawned. This has been the most amazing night of my life. Good. Now wasn't the time to tell her it could have been better still. With a rueful smile, Eddie said, Don't forget, if you need anything at all, I'm just next door. Lily nodded again, her hair brushing against the skin exposed by the V of his open-necked shirt. Eddie realised it was the most physical contact he was going to experience. Then she stepped back, took her shoes and bag and said sleepily, Thanks so much. Good night. Night, said Eddie as she shuffled inside and closed the door. Lily woke with a start at 6:30. Okay, time to get up. Bit of a headache, but nothing a grown 25-year-old couldn't handle. She blinked at the elaborate ceiling cornice overhead, then scanned the room and wondered why there were no clothes strewn over the chairs. Had she actually hung them up in the wardrobe last night? Because that was uncharacteristically efficient. Then she threw back the bed covers and realised she was still wearing her premiere dress. Well, that solved that mystery. Too much excitement, not enough sleep beforehand, and a crash course in whiskey had caused her to zonk out, which was good in one way, but somewhat disappointing in another, seeing as she'd wondered if last night might have ended up with altogether less sleeping going on. Then again, if the idea had only been in her head and not Eddie's, maybe it was just as well. Imagine making a pass at him and being told, gently but firmly, that as far as he was concerned, he'd only invited her along because they were friends. And with a bit of whiskey inside her, she might well have been tempted to give it a go. Oh, the potential for humiliation. Thank goodness she hadn't done it. In the shower, To distract herself from thoughts of Eddie, Lily marvelled at everything else that had happened yesterday evening. The premiere, the mouse, her dress flying up, eating pizza from room service with Eddie and Mira whilst teaching them how to play word squares. Mad. Just mad. By 7 o'clock she was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, almost ready to leave. The car would be waiting at the front entrance of the hotel at 7:15 to take her home. Should she knock on Eddie's door and say goodbye, or would he be fast asleep and unamused at being woken up? But as she gathered together her belongings and collected up all the free things in the luxurious marble bathroom, shampoo, little sewing kit, emery boards, disposable slippers, Lily heard the sounds of movement next door. 2 minutes later, having let herself out of her own room, she hesitated, then tapped on Eddie's door. It opened almost immediately, and there he was, evidently just out of the shower himself and wearing nothing but a white bath towel slung around his hips, which was slightly less than she'd ever seen him in before, and a rather impressive sight. "Hey, how are you feeling?" Lily hesitated, because the honest answer would have been a bit dry-mouthed, actually, what with you being naked under that towel. Instead, she said brightly, "I'm great. Can't believe how shattered I was last night. Anyway, just dropped by to say thank you for inviting me. I had the best time ever." "Good." His smile held a hint of wryness. "I'm glad." One tiny thing had been niggling her. "I won't really be on the front pages of the papers, will I? You weren't serious about that." "Who knows?" Eddie shrugged. "To be honest, it's more likely to be a photo of Mira leaping into the air to get away from the mouse, alongside another of the mouse itself." Lily nodded, reassured. "It'll be that." "Do you want to come in?" He moved to one side, gesturing for her to do so. "Better not, it's 7:10. By the time I get downstairs, my car will be waiting." Get me saying my car, as if I've been chauffeured around all my life. "Okay. Well, bye." He placed his hand at the back of her neck and drew her towards him. "And thanks for keeping me company. I enjoyed last night far more than I usually do." His mouth was an inch from the side of her face, his breath toothpastey and warm. As Lily inhaled the scent of him, he gave her a brief kiss on the cheek, then another, and one more. Each time, his mouth had edged closer to hers until their lips met. Then several brief kisses transformed into one long one, and a rush of heat spread through Lily's stomach, because she'd wondered so often how it would feel to be kissed by Eddie Tesla. She'd seen him kissing other girls in films, and now, at last, it was happening to her. Except this time, hopefully, he wasn't acting. On the last occasion, when it had seemed as if a kiss was imminent, they'd been interrupted by Dan's unexpected arrival at the cottage. Dan wasn't here now. Okay, thinking about Dan had to be the most irrelevant thing she could be doing. As she took a step back and gazed up into Eddie's eyes, he said, "Coming in after all?" It was definitely a tempting offer. But Lily shook her head. "I can't, the car's downstairs." "The car would wait. That's what they get paid to do." "I know, but I need to get back. For work." It was set to be busy at the yard. Marty had the day off and they were due a visit from one of their biggest overseas buyers. "Could you not even be a little bit late?" said Eddie. "I really can't." "You're breaking my heart." Lily smiled. "No, I'm not." Of course, it would be possible to keep the car waiting downstairs, then drive that bit faster back to Stanton Langley in order to make up the time. But if she was going to sleep with Eddie, she wanted it to be more than a 10-minute quickie. "If I wasn't stuck doing interviews," he murmured, "I'd come with you." "I'd still have to work." "Not all the time." He stroked the side of her face, his smile regretful. "Okay, I don't want to, but I'm going to let you go. For now." The way he was looking at her caused Lily's stomach to do a mini flip, which was doubtless what he intended. She nodded. "Okay." "But this is definitely unfinished business. You do know that, don't you?" "I like you," said Eddie, "and I'll call you later, okay?" Lily emerged from the mirrored lift on the ground floor and stepped into the foyer of the hotel. Her phone rang and Eddie's name flashed up. She pressed answer. "Hi, did I forget something?" No, just wait there, I'm on my way down. Is that wise, considering you're not wearing any clothes? A carry-on scenario flashed through her brain, of Eddie emerging from the lift just as the doors closed, snatching away the towel around his hips. Then she saw him descending the staircase. In 20 seconds flat, he'd pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, though his feet were still bare. Missing you already? He was smiling. Plus, how bloody rude of me not to walk you to your car. He picked up her overnight case, slid his hand around her waist, and together they made their way out through the doors and down the steps. When the case had been stowed in the boot of the waiting car, Eddie kissed her once more. What are you doing? Lily pulled back. People are watching. Let them watch, I don't care. Excited on the inside, but determined not to show it, Lily said, Well, you might not have a reputation to keep up, but some of us do.
End of CD 5. CD 6.
Chapter 26. You made it back then? Dan remarked when Lily came into the office at 5 to 10. Was she glowing? Lily felt as if she might be glowing. Oh, but it was so hard to play it cool when you had this much adrenaline sloshing around your system. Of course I made it back. Reaching for the charger on the desk, she plugged in her phone. I said I would, didn't I? What are you doing here anyway? Coral called me an hour ago. She couldn't get through to you and was worried in case you'd been held up. I offered to come and help out. I know I can't do much, he added as Lily opened her mouth to protest. But I can man the phone, deal with emails and print out receipts. Why would I not turn up? Have I ever let anyone down before? I forgot my charger and my phone's dead, that's all. I could have stayed longer in London if I'd wanted to, Lily added, but I didn't because I'm reliable. And when I make a promise, I keep it. You know I do. They stared at each other in silence. Whoops. Was it the look in Dan's eyes or her own surfeit of adrenaline making her defensive? Why was she suddenly feeling guilty, for heaven's sake? Finally, he said, Did you have a nice time? Lily exhaled. Yes, I did. I had an amazing time. What was the film like? Great! Okay, it hadn't been that great for her, what with it being sci-fi, but that was besides the point. And afterwards we went back to the hotel with Mira Knowles, had pizza in her suite and played word games. Rock and roll, said Dan. And what happened after that? Why are you looking at me like that? Did you sleep with him? Well, that's none of your business, said Lily. I'll take that as a yes, then. And so what if I did? Nothing. I just thought you'd have had more sense, because all he was doing was using you. Oh, we're back to this again, are we? Why couldn't he be happy for her? Why was he being like this, trying to spoil everything? Except maybe you've got it the wrong way round and I'm the one using him. Before Dan could reply, the door swung open and Coral exclaimed, You're back! Oh my God, can you believe you're on the front page of the paper? I screamed when I saw it. Am I really? Lily was startled. I haven't seen it. I mean, Eddie said it might happen, but I thought he was joking. Show her. Coral nodded excitedly at the newspaper lying face down beside the computer, and Dan pushed it across the desk towards Lily. Her eyes widened further still when she saw the photos and read the accompanying piece. You definitely chose the right dress. You look fantastic. Coral was bubbling with enthusiasm. And there's more on the next page. Everyone was wondering who on earth you were. It says you kept giving them different names and it just made them all the more interested, and now they want to know if you're Eddie's new girlfriend. The next moment, Lily's plugged-in phone began to ring and she saw the caller was Eddie. Hi! Her eyes felt as if they were actually sparkling as she listened to him. I know, my phone died. I've only just seen it now. After a bit longer, she said, Me too. Definitely. Then a short time after that, Sounds great. Yes, I know. Of course I do. That'll be perfect. Yes, we will. Brilliant. Can't wait. Bye. Yes, okay, bye. She finally hung up, aware that she was smiling like a lunatic. Wrong number, said Dan. She said, I'd call it the right number. Eddie's coming down here tomorrow evening to see me. Oh, my goodness. Coral clasped her hands together. You really like him, I can tell. Lily nodded. I do, she said simply. Dan had turned his attention to the computer and was apparently engrossed in the words he was reading on the screen. Anyway, I'm back now, Lily went on cheerfully. You don't need to be here anymore, looking all superior and disapproving. With a flourish, she handed Dan the crutch he'd left propped up against the desk. You can go. Okay, so it had been a slightly odd experience, having a first date under the discreet but watchful gaze of your ex-husband. On the other hand, it had meant she hadn't needed to drive anywhere, and at least the food had been guaranteed to be good. It was just a shame that the date himself had chatted to so many women online that he'd got Patsy's details muddled up with those of another divorcee who definitely didn't want children at some stage in the future. After that, he couldn't get away fast enough, evidently terrified that she might force him to impregnate her before the night was out. He'd also meticulously divided their dinner bill according to what each of them had eaten, and announced with pride that he wouldn't be tipping because he didn't believe in tips. Oh, well, at least you didn't find out a year from now. Sean had beckoned for her to join him up at the bar after the dreamboat had left. You haven't wasted any time on him. Patsy pulled a face. Apart from this evening, her friend Finola had invited her to an impromptu barbecue in Chipping Norton, and she'd had to say she couldn't make it because she already had a date. She wondered what the evening might have been like if she'd gone along to Finola's instead. What if the perfect man for her was there, wishing he could meet the perfect woman for him? Not that there was any way of ever knowing the answer to that question. It was too late to go over there now. Cheer up, have a drink, said Sean, opening the wine fridge. Chablis? Chablis was her favourite. Patsy shook her head. Thanks, but it's okay. No one else was currently in earshot. Sean said, Don't let it get you down. Have you given any more thought to, what we talked about before? Of course I've thought about it, she smiled faintly. It's not the kind of offer you forget about. And? I just don't know. I mean, it's nice to know it's there. Okay, I don't think we mentioned it before, but in case you were wondering, if you did decide you liked the idea, we prefer to go the turkey baster route. Sean lowered his voice and added, rather than au naturel. Oh, yes, of course, I hadn't even thought of doing it that way, said Patsy. I'd assumed it'd be turkey baster from the word go. Right, well that's good, so long as we both know how it would happen. But like we said before, no pressure. Sean gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Plenty of time to decide. Patsy nodded. Of course she'd prefer to have a baby with a partner of her own, someone who loved her for herself. But look at tonight's date. What if she ended up with someone who refused to tip because he was such a cheapskate? Sean, meanwhile, was still holding the bottle of Chablis. Sure you don't want one on the house? I'm sure. She smiled at her ex-husband, touched by his kindness. I'm just not in the mood for a drink. Chapter 27. Dan was in the mood for a drink. He was in the mood for several. On his way down to the shop this afternoon, he'd stopped to talk to Maggie Bennett, who was taking her hyperactive 3-year-old grandson out on his new tricycle. The boy, desperate to get to the playground and losing patience with his grandmother, had taken aim and cycled furiously into the back of her legs, causing Maggie to lurch forward in shock and hang on to Dan for support. Which wouldn't normally have been a problem, except she'd grabbed him by the shoulder and, in an effort to stay upright, simultaneously stepped on his foot. Needless to say, it was his bad foot and his strapped-up shoulder. If she'd also managed to punch him in his black eye, she'd have achieved the hat-trick. Plus, poor Maggie was so mortified and apologetic that Dan had then been forced to pretend everything was fine, and it hadn't hurt a bit. At least her grandson had found it funny. That boy was definitely a Hannibal Lecter in the making. The pain had been intense. It had carried on making itself felt all afternoon and on into the evening. Banned from the pub because Patsy was meeting another of her internet dates there, Dan dosed himself up with painkillers and stretched out on the sofa to watch Star Wars. But for once, even his all-time favourite film didn't have the desired effect. It wasn't managing to distract him from thoughts of Lily with Eddie Tesla. And the more Dan thought about it, the more it bothered him. Lily had had boyfriends before. Not many, but a few. And he'd been able to accept the situation, maybe because he'd looked at each of them and known instinctively that there was no need to worry. They wouldn't be around for long. He'd always been right, too. Within a few weeks, Lily would invariably lose interest and end the relationship. As soon as it became apparent to her that they weren't the one, she saw no reason to carry on seeing them simply in order to have a boyfriend in her life. The only one who'd lasted any length of time had been Phil, but even then Dan hadn't been concerned. Phil had seemed on the surface like a nice enough guy, but Dan had known he would reveal his true colours sooner or later. It had happened following Nick's sudden death when, sure enough, Phil had completely failed to understand why Lily would want to support Coral in her grief rather than carry on socialising with him. His lack of empathy had killed the 6-month relationship stone dead, and Dan had been glad, because Lily deserved so much better than someone like Phil. That another relationship hadn't materialised in the last couple of years was purely down to the fact that she'd been so completely uninterested in meeting anyone. And somehow Dan had got used to this being the situation, had been lulled into a false sense of security. Although the logical part of his brain was aware that at some stage in the future it was bound to happen, the illogical part had been hoping it never would. Except now the false sense of security had been ruthlessly ripped away, and it felt as if a bottomless sinkhole had opened up beneath his feet. At the moment he was still hovering at ground level, like a character in a cartoon stepping off a cliff into thin air, but at any moment now gravity would set in and he'd go plunging down, down, down. Because while none of the other boyfriends in Lily's life had felt like a threat, Eddie Tesla did. He was in a different league altogether, and Lily was clearly both flattered and smitten. Dan's mouth was dry, his mind in unaccustomed turmoil. While all he could do was endure it and pray for the relationship to crash and burn, he had the awful feeling it wouldn't. Basically, why would Eddie Tesla lose interest in someone as funny and original and quirky and lovable as Lily? Let's face it, the attraction between them was already there. He'd heard about it from Lily and Patsy, and now he'd seen it with his own eyes. And why wouldn't it exist? She was perfect. Hadn't he himself spent years, after all, trying to find someone who could successfully take his mind off her? He had tried over and over again and had failed miserably. The film was still playing on the TV screen, but Dan was paying it no attention. Instead, he reached once more for his laptop and fired it up, like some kind of masochist, because it wasn't as if all the photos of Eddie and Lily together weren't already seared indelibly into his brain. Yet he was still compelled to look at them again, scrolling awkwardly with his left hand, clicking on link after link and experiencing a fresh stab of jealousy with each photo in turn. It was just so clear, so visible, the connection between them. The cameras had caught it perfectly, damn them miracle lenses. The way Eddie was looking at Lily as if he couldn't believe his luck, and the way Lily was glowing with the kind of happiness that only... A key turned in the lock, the front door opened, and Dan hurriedly closed the lid of the laptop, as guilty as if he'd been caught watching porn. One look at Patsy's face told him the evening hadn't been a success. "Oh dear," said Dan. "Marks out of 10? Minus 476. He felt for her. That's a disappointing date. "Just your average disaster, story of my life." Patsy turned to look at the TV screen. "Are you watching that?" Which was shorthand for, "Please tell me you're not watching that awful film again, because I'd quite like to put on The Holiday to cheer me up." "No, you go ahead." Switching off the laptop and hauling himself awkwardly to his feet, Dan winced at the pain. "If I'm allowed back in now, I think I'll head down to the pub." It was 11 o'clock and Sean was calling last orders. Dan held up his empty glass. "Yes, please." Because 11 o'clock was far too early. He hadn't come out until 9:30 and was nowhere near finished yet. "Are you sure?" Sean was raising an eyebrow at him in that knowing, landlordy way landlords have. "Sure, I'm sure, absolutely, and have one for yourself." Easing his wallet out of his jeans pocket with his left hand, Dan dropped it on the floor. "Bugger." "Here, let me." Sean came out from behind the bar and retrieved the wallet. "Were you drinking before you came out tonight?" "No, not me." Well, yes, I was drinking, said Dan. But only orange juice. Nothing in it, I swear. You've only had 4 drinks here. Sean started to wash glasses. You shouldn't be this far gone. What else have you taken? Just painkillers. Oh, said Dan. That could be it. We ran out of paracetamol, so I had some, other stuff instead. Not that kind of other stuff. He shook his head and wavered for a moment on his bar stool. It was a prescription Patsy had for painkillers that time she did her back in. Well, that was intelligent, Sean said dryly. No other choice, I was in agony. Dan grinned. Maggie Bennett threw herself at me this afternoon. I know, you already told me. Had he? Dan looked at the clusters of lights behind the bar, noticed that there appeared to be more of them than usual, and belatedly realised he was seeing double. It was pretty. Christmassy. He said, The lights look nice. Amused, Sean said, Do they? Yes. And you have lovely eyes. Thanks. Just one more drink. You can flirt with me all you like, but I'm still not serving you. I feel woozy, said Dan. He paused to consider the word. Woozy? Woozy? How do you spell woozy? I spell it Pissed, Sean said sympathetically. You're not yourself tonight. What's going on? I don't know. I think I'm having an out-of-body experience. Am I floating? I feel as if I'm floating. Don't look at me like that, said Dan. I'm going through a horrible, horrible time. You mean not being able to work? Sean indicated the sling around his neck and the aluminium crutch hooked over the side of the bar. Not that. Worse than that. He really did feel as if he were floating now. Girl problems? Kind of. Dan paused, suddenly overcome with the need to confide the truth. Honestly, it's killing me and there's nothing in the world I can do about it. Something to do with Patsy? Sean suddenly looked really concerned. Dan shook his head. Whoa, more fuzziness, and said, Not Patsy, someone else. I want to tell you, but I can't, because that's the thing. He went on helplessly. I can't tell anyone. It's the biggest secret of my life. We have a guest, Sean announced 30 minutes later. Dan nodded and pointed to his own chest. It's me. So I see. Amused, Will cleared the slew of boxing magazines out of the way, then jumped up and helped him onto the sofa. Hello, guest. How are you doing? What's going on? I will. Sorry about this. Sean thinks I need looking after. He took some of Patsy's prescription painkillers, then came down to the pub and had a few drinks, because he's a complete idiot. Sean shook his head good-naturedly. Patsy will be asleep by now, so I think it's best if we just keep an eye on him here. Like a homeless dog. Dan pulled an appropriately mournful face. Like an over-medicated homeless dog with a broken foot and a smashed-up shoulder, Will grinned. So, are you ready to crash out, or can I get you a coffee? I don't want to sleep. I can't sleep. Dan considered the limited options. They were unlikely to offer him a glass of red wine. Coffee, please. Coffee would be good. We can just chat, can't we? He was oh so in the mood to talk. We'll all have coffee. Sean nodded soothingly and looked at Will. Dan's been going through a hard time recently. I have. Dan nodded too and felt his head do that swimmy thing again. I am. Oh no, girlfriend trouble, said Will. He can't tell us what it's about, said Sean. I really like to. Dan shrugged, forgetting how much it would hurt. Ow, damn it. He gazed helplessly at the pair of them. They'd been through difficult times themselves, hadn't they? Yet his dilemma was different. That's fine, Will reassured him. I'll make the coffee. I want to talk about it more than anything, but I mustn't, said Dan. I just mustn't. He held the index finger of his left hand up to his mouth to show how discreet he was. It's a great big secret. Chapter 28. And I don't know what to do. I wish I didn't feel like this, but there isn't any way to make it stop. Dan rubbed his good hand over his stubbly jawline. I love her. I just really and truly love her. And the thing is, I love her too much to risk ever doing anything about it. There. He could hardly believe he'd said them, but the words were out. It had been like jamming a nail into a car tyre and hearing the hiss of air escaping under pressure, except instead of air, it had been his deepest, darkest, and most personal confession spilling out. Oh God, though, the anguish it had caused him over the years. Sean and Will were looking pretty startled too. As well they might. Seriously, said Sean. I wouldn't say if it wasn't true. And you just suddenly realised this, last week? Ha, if only. Dan shook his head. Longer ago than that, much longer. How much longer? Said Will. Oh, give or take a few days, it'll be 9 years now. What? Dan even knew the day. He could pin it down to the exact moment. He'd replayed it in his mind 1,000 times. Remember the week in St. Ives? That holiday we all went on together after I'd finished my A-levels and Lily had just taken her GCSEs. Dan watched Sean nod in agreement. Of course Sean remembered. He'd still been married to Patsy at the time. The three of them had gone down to Cornwall with Coral, Nick and Lily, staying in a fantastic hotel overlooking the main surfing beach. The weather had been kind to them, hot sunny days melting into balmy nights. He'd met a girl whose name he'd long forgotten, and Lily had teased him because the girl had this way of gazing at him as if he was some kind of superstar. And he'd laughed about it because Lily was forever teasing him. They'd grown up together making merciless fun of each other. It was just what they did. The change had happened on the last but one night of the holiday, surging out of nowhere with no warning at all. The adults, he might have been 18 but he wasn't one of the grown-ups, were starting a barbecue on the beach. He and Lily had been exploring the rocks over to the left of the bay. Hello, are you actually going to tell us? Said Sean. Or were you just going to sit there picturing the scene in your head? Sorry. It was exactly what he'd been doing. The evening of the barbecue. Lily was wearing a loose pink cotton sweater and jeans. I was wearing a denim shirt and orange board shorts. Lily found a baby crab in one of the rock pools. Then she spotted a bigger crab in the sea below us and said it must be the baby's mum. So I scooped up the baby crab, climbed down and slipped it back into the water. Except then another big crab crawled out from under one of the rocks in the pool, and Lily said we hadn't reunited mother and baby at all. We'd actually separated them. Was this too much detail? Dan found he couldn't bear to miss any of it out. So I called her a dipstick and she called me a murderer because the baby crab would probably die without its mum. And that was when I dived off the rocks into the sea. I remember now. Sean was nodding. Well, I couldn't find the baby crab, but I managed to slice my knee open on the edge of a rock underwater and came up swearing. Lily thought it was hilarious and said, "Is there blood?" "Oh, look, and there's a shark heading straight for you." Then the next moment she saw the blood spreading in the water like a cloud and jumped in with me. Will's eyes were wide. Was there a shark? No. Reliving the moment, Dan smiled and shook his head. She just jumped in for the hell of it, with all her clothes on. We swam all the way around the rocks and made our way back to the shore. My knee was still pouring with blood and Lily called me a liability and a hopeless case. Then I sat on the beach and she rinsed all the sand out of the cut. And I looked down at the back of her head with her wet hair rippling over her shoulders. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I realised I loved her. With all my heart. And that was when she turned to look at me and said, "You know what you are, don't you? A crab murderer with an attention-seeking knee." For a couple of seconds, the cottage was silent. "What happened next?" prompted Will. "Nothing. I couldn't do anything. Or say anything. I couldn't tell her." Dan marvelled at the very idea. She'd have laughed her head off. I'd never have lived it down. I needed time to get used to the idea, work out what I was going to do. I took you back to the hotel to get your knee bandaged up, Sean remembered. And you were meant to be spending the next day, the last day of the holiday, with that pretty girl you'd been seeing. What was her name? Can't remember. Maeve, that was it. She was from Coventry. But you called and told her you couldn't meet up after all. None of us understood why. Well, now you know, said Dan. The lightheadedness was still there, along with a sense of freedom. At long last he'd bared his soul. Sean said, and you've been recklessly damaging yourself ever since, desperate for Lily to show you some more sympathy. Believe it or not, I didn't do all this on purpose. Dan glanced down at his injuries. All this time, Will marvelled, and you've never once made a move. Never once. Dan was already picturing the unfolding next scene. Why not? Said Will. I thought I'd hang fire for a bit, make sure the feelings were real. I mean, really real. I couldn't take the risk of rushing into anything. Plus, I was about to head off to uni. I'd never waited before, it had never even occurred to me. But this was Lily we were talking about. I knew it was important. Everything had to be right. Dan raked his fingers through his hair. It had to be completely right, because if it went wrong, our whole relationship would be ruined. So I waited until the 30th of August. Nick's birthday, said Sean, as Dan had known he would. Dan nodded. He was having one of his big parties to celebrate. Everyone was invited. It was scary to think I was going to do it at last, but exciting too. Until I was standing at the back of the marquee that evening, and I overheard Lily and her friend Amber talking outside the tent. We were less than 2 feet away from each other, separated by a sheet of canvas, but they had no idea I was there. Amber was saying how much she fancied me, which I'd known for ages, and how she couldn't understand why Lily didn't. He paused, his mouth dry. And Lily said she'd never had and never would fancy me. I just wasn't the kind of guy she'd ever go for, not in a million years. She might not have meant it, said Will. Oh, she did, believe me. Why would she say it otherwise? She told Amber I wasn't her type, I was the opposite of her type. And she certainly sounded as if she meant it. We've all said things we didn't mean, though. Will pulled a face. When I was 18, I told everyone who'd listen that I fancied the pants off Yasmin Le Bon. Of course, it was really Simon Le Bon. He shook his head at Dan. I can't believe you gave up just like that, and it never occurred to you to try again, in case you might have changed your mind. To make his point, he indicated Sean next to him. Because, you know, sometimes people do. Okay. Dan raised a hand to stop him. You haven't heard the rest of it yet. The double whammy. They couldn't begin to understand the lasting impact that evening had had on him. He was still able to vividly recall every second of it, every emotion, every word, every last detail. So there I was. I'd overheard Lily and Amber talking about me, and it had come as a shock. Then they moved off, and the next moment someone was putting their hand on my shoulder. It was Nick, said Dan. I hadn't even realised he'd been standing behind me. He'd heard Lily too, and I thought he was just going to make a joke about it because he didn't know how I felt about Lily, but it turned out he did know. He sat me down and told me he'd seen what was happening ever since the holiday in Cornwall, had realised the way things could be going. And he said he needed to make me understand why it might not be a good idea. Sean was looking shocked. He warned you off? Like Don Corleone in The Godfather? No, it wasn't a threat. Actually, it was worse than that. If Nick had flatly refused to permit any kind of relationship, Dan knew his 18-year-old self would have been inclined to just go ahead and do it anyway. Instead, Nick had reasoned with him and appealed to his better nature. He was incredibly nice about it, sympathetic. He said it might have seemed like a good idea, but imagine what it would be like if me and Lily got together and it didn't work out. And really, we were so young, the chances were that it wouldn't last, and then how awkward would things be? Everyone in Stanton Langley doted on Lily. If I ended up breaking her heart, I wouldn't hear the end of it. He paused, then shrugged. Well, he was right about that. Basically, I didn't have the best reputation, and if I hurt Lily, I'd never be forgiven. As Nick said, we could either stay as we were and be friends for life, or I could try and take things further and risk losing everything. And not just Lily, our friends, families, everyone. Wow, said Will. Heavy. But he had a point, said Sean. He did. Dan nodded in weary agreement. You slept with Amber that night for a start. Dan shrugged and nodded again. He wasn't proud of himself for having done that. In his admittedly inadequate defence, he'd been 18 years old and his heart had just been broken into a million pieces. It had also made Amber's night. At the time, it had seemed like the only thing to do. Then you went off to university and slept with most of the girls there too. Not most of them, said Dan, although it had been a fair few. So anyway, you see now why I never did say anything. It would have been me versus the whole of Stanton Langley. Not once had it occurred to any of them that he might be the way he was, purely because he wasn't allowed to make his feelings known to the one girl he truly did want and felt he could be faithful to. But the years had rolled by and he'd grown into his role as an indefatigable ladies' man. He tried so hard to fall in love with another girl, but it just hadn't happened. And over time he'd realised he could no longer be sure he did trust himself 100%. The fear was too great to take the risk. Because what if he couldn't? All the more reason not to try. Sean had been watching him disappear into his memories. Now he said, So this is why you have your jokey relationship with Lily. You fake flirt with her because it would be weird not to, but it's a double bluff because deep down you actually mean it. And you've got used to things being the way they are because it's safe and you're not risking the whole thing blowing up and hitting the fan. Spookily spot on. Was it being gay that made Sean so adept at digging beneath the carefully constructed devil-may-care surface and understanding what was actually going on in his confused and despairing mind? Sounds about right, said Dan. So what happens now? Asked Will. Are you going to tell her how you feel? There it was again, the serrated knife in the stomach. Dan shook his head. No, I'm not. I can't. All the old arguments still stand. I know what I'm like. I've been this way for so long now. I can't afford to take the risk of fucking up. More silence. Finally, Sean said, So all this business with her and Eddie Tesla must be pretty hard for you to handle. Let's just say it hasn't been the best few days of my life. Maybe he'll lose interest, said Sean. He might not, said Will unhelpfully. Dan was suddenly overwhelmed with exhaustion. The lightheadedness had dissipated, his eyelids were now heavy, and his brain appeared to have been replaced by cotton wool. Under the accidental influence of drink and drugs, he'd shared his secret, which had been a relief at the time, though it wasn't as if there was anything they could do about it. There was no magic answer. You mustn't tell anyone. Through half-closed eyes, he looked from Sean to Will. I mean it. You have to swear on your lives. Lily must never know. They were both nodding sympathetically. Don't worry, we promise, said Sean. Your secret's safe with us. Will was smiling. Same. And let's face it, if you can't trust a couple of gay men who both hid their sexuality for years, well, who can you trust? Dan woke up at 6:30 the next morning. Sean and Will were both upstairs asleep. He left a note on the coffee table. Don't worry, I'm still alive. Many thanks for last night. D. P.S. Remember, just between us. As he let himself out of the house, it occurred to him that anyone else catching sight of the note might think they'd had a threesome. Limping along like Long John Silver, he paused outside the cottage and decided to head on down to the high street. The newsagents would be open. He wanted to pick up a couple of papers, and they sold painkillers too. In the newsagents, he flicked casually, one-handedly, through some of the papers, not even admitting to himself what he was looking for, until he turned a page and saw the huge photo captioned, This could be the one, says Eddie. Then he really wished he hadn't bothered. Oh my goodness, said a blonde girl, grinning across at him as she picked a copy of Heat magazine off the rack. You've been in the wars. She was young, pretty, clearly interested. There was a fuchsia pink streak in her hair. Out of sheer habit, Dan flashed a brief smile in return. You should see the other guy. I can imagine. Wow, that's what I call a black eye. Is it really painful? Not nearly as painful as looking at pictures of Lily with Eddie Tesla. I'm managing. He wondered idly who she was. I'm Shaz, hi. Saw you looking at that photo just then. If you're from around here, you must know Lily. Dan no longer needed to wonder. She was a journalist. Sorry, I can't help you. Oh, that's a shame. It's such a great story, real Cinderella stuff. Shaz's eyes were bright as she said playfully, Now you're making me wonder if she's an ex-girlfriend of yours. Dan shook his head. No. Limping over to the counter with the newspaper tucked under his arm, he asked Ted Wilson for a packet of paracetamol, paid for both items and made to leave. As he reached the door, he heard Ted say to Shaz, If you want to know about Lily, I can tell you everything you need. You can? Shaz perked up. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, you'll pay, will you? Depending on the information, we can certainly negotiate a price. Shaz nodded so vigorously her earrings jangled. Dan turned in the doorway and raised his eyebrows at Ted, who had only moved into the village a couple of years ago. What? Said Ted defensively. If I don't do it, someone else will. Exactly, said Shaz. Chapter 29. Who knew so much could happen in the space of a week? Lily was brushing her teeth in the ensuite bathroom of her hotel room. Not up in London this time, but in the Valentine's best room, occupied for the past 7 days by herself and Eddie Tesla. And if it seemed weird to others that she was staying in a hotel in her own village, well, it felt a bit weird to her too. Most annoyingly, one of her all-time favourite things about hotels had been going downstairs to the dining room in the morning and enjoying a proper, cooked, full English breakfast. Except when you knew the chef and the waitresses and could see them looking at you as if you were a whole different person, it all became hugely awkward and impossible. Lunch or dinner at the Star, being served by friends, fine. Breakfast at the Valentine, too embarrassing for words. And as for having it delivered to your room, actually carried in on a silver tray while you stood beside the huge velvet-canopied four-poster bed you'd spent the night in with the hotel's current VIP. Oh, no way, forget it. Lily grimaced at her reflection in the mirror and spat toothpaste froth into the sink. The term VIP was something else she wasn't fond of. What are you pulling that face for? Emerging from the shower behind her, Eddie slicked his wet hair back with his hands. Lily smiled, because sharing the king-sized hotel bed with Eddie was something she was enjoying about her stay here. She rinsed her mouth with water, spat again, and said, It should be VFP. Of course it should. He wrapped his arms around her. What are you on about? People say VIP, but they don't mean VIP. Some people are important, but most aren't, she told him. It should be very famous person. That's what they really mean, isn't it? Or just FP, because most people aren't even very famous. So true. Eddie was looking amused. And what about me? What would I be? You'd qualify as a QFP, said Lily. Quintessentially famous person? Quite famous. He pretended to bite her bare shoulder. Thank you for putting me in my place. That's quintessentially all right. And now I need to go to work. Well, tea and toast at home, then work. Do you have to? You know I do. We're busier than ever. She shook her head. And that's all your fault too. I'm sorry. Are you writing your script today? I'll be trying to write my script. It was Eddie's turn to pull a face. Never having had trouble getting the words down before, he was struggling with the current storyline. You'll get back into it, Lily assured him. It's your fault. I can't concentrate when you're around to distract me. She twisted round and planted a kiss on his mouth. Which is why I'm leaving now. Downstairs, as she was making her way out through the main doors and along the driveway, Lily heard a clatter of china and someone loudly hissing her name. She turned and saw one of the waitresses hurrying after her, clutching a fully laden breakfast tray. It was Jessica Raven, a sweet girl in her late teens who lived in the village with her parents and numerous brothers and sisters. Hi, Jess, how are you? Okay, thanks. Jessica glanced furtively from left to right like a cartoon burglar. Right, so here's the thing. None of us are allowed to ask Eddie Tesla for his autograph, but I really want one, so I was wondering... You want me to ask Eddie for his autograph? Well, you're having sex with him, so it's not like he's going to say no, is it? Lily blinked. I suppose not. So will you do it? Since she couldn't think of a reason not to, Lily said, OK. Brilliant. Can I have 10, please? 10 autographs? I know, but we're a big family. They'll be dead upset if they don't get one each. Lily gave in. All right, I'll text Eddie and ask him to do it. You can pick them up from his room later. Except I don't want to get sacked, so could you take them up to the yard and one of my brothers will come along to collect them later this afternoon? That way, if anyone from the hotel asks, you can tell them it was nothing to do with me. OK, said Lily. Thanks. You're so lucky. Jessica sighed. Eddie Tesla's well fit. Yes. The younger girl broke into a complicit grin. I bet he's great in bed. Arriving at the yard at 4 o'clock, Eddie handed over an envelope containing the autographed cards. Here you go. Thanks, sorry about that, said Lily. But she's a sweet girl, I didn't have the heart to say no. He shrugged, amused. What's the betting they'll be up on eBay by this evening? Oh no, she wouldn't do that. Lily shook her head vigorously. Don't worry, Jess isn't like that at all. Eddie dropped a kiss on her forehead. If you say so. Lifting her chin, Lily found his mouth and kissed him back, briefly but with great affection. Oh, she did enjoy being allowed to do this. After years of concealing her true feelings for Dan, it was just so lovely to be able to act on impulse and openly demonstrate how she felt. Eddie might not be Dan, but he was now her boyfriend and she was enjoying every minute of their relationship. She gave him one last kiss for luck. How's the script going? Badly, which is why I walked up here to give you these. And now you can walk back to the hotel and give it another go. I'll see you at 7:30, said Lily. You have another 3 hours to get some words down. Slave driver, said Eddie. It's my middle name. He smiled. Attractive. As he strolled off, Lily noticed a couple of customers surreptitiously taking photos of him on their phones. She also saw one of Jessica's younger brothers riding his bike around in tight circles on the section of pavement beyond the gates. As soon as Eddie had disappeared from view, the teenager rode into the yard, skidded to a halt in front of her and nodded at the envelope in her hand. Is that them? Yes, here you go. She handed the autographs over. Cheers! The boy, it was either Tim or Tom, Lily couldn't remember which, slid the envelope inside the front of his jacket. Not at school today? He looked shocked. Nah, I left school 2 weeks ago after my GCSEs. Oh, right. Any luck finding a job yet? Yeah. The boy had a cheeky, lopsided grin. Buying and selling stuff, you know. Wheeling and dealing. I'm like a freelance entrepreneur. Watching him ride off in a scatter of gravel, Lily had to admire his chutzpah. He was definitely going to sell those autographs on eBay. Chapter 30. Talk about mixed emotions. From the safety of the kitchen, Coral could hear the buzz of voices outside, the chink of glasses, the bursts of laughter. Holding informal get-togethers at Goldstone House had always been one of her and Nick's favourite things. Following Nick's death, she'd no longer had the heart for it. But time moved on. She was getting back into the swing of things socially, and this evening's mini-party had evolved so naturally that she'd been happy to do it. Lily and Eddie, herself and Patsy, Dan, Declan and Gail. And Gail seemed perfectly pleasant. She worked as a buyer for an upmarket London department store and had already given Coral invaluable advice about replacing the taps in the downstairs cloakroom and the best place to order specialist light bulbs online. All in all, what could be nicer and more relaxed? If you didn't happen to have a stonking crush on Declan and the terrible fear that his girlfriend was able to read you like a book. Anyway, never mind, she was just being paranoid. Of course Gail couldn't tell. And this was Lily's evening. She was lit up with happiness, even managing to upstage Eddie himself. Everyone was getting on together just fine. Dan was back to his laid-back, wisecracking best, and it hadn't even been embarrassing when one of the barmaids from next door had popped in and asked Eddie if she could have a selfie taken with him. Despite the fact that it had ended up being 7 selfies, because the girl's adrenaline-induced blinking had rendered the first 6 attempts not good enough. It hadn't mattered at all, though. Eddie had submitted with good grace, and the girl, having proudly uploaded the end result to social media, was now the envy of all her female friends on Facebook. "Come on, let's get the rest of this food through." Lily came into the kitchen, flushed and sparkly-eyed. "It all looks fantastic." "Is Eddie all right?" "He's great." She was 25 now, old enough to settle down. In case Lily was wondering, Coral said, "I do like him, you know, very much." Lily gave her a quick hug. "I know, me too." Together they carried out the bowls of salad and dishes of salmon, curried eggs, baked tomatoes and Caribbean rice. On the terrace, Dan had taken charge of the barbecue and was deftly, one-handedly turning the steaks, sausages and marinated chicken legs. Smoky, spicy cooking smells filled the air as more food was laid out on the long table between plates, wine buckets and glasses. "You have a beautiful garden," Gail told Coral as music was turned on in the living room and Alicia Keys' silky voice drifted out through the propped-open French doors. "Just lovely." The happy feeling in Coral's stomach mingled uneasily with the sensation that Gail was about to interrogate her in an exam for which she'd forgotten to revise. "Thanks, we like it." Coral gave the potato salad a stir it didn't need. "Are you a gardener?" "God, no, not me. All those insects and worms." Gail shuddered. "But I don't mind sitting in a deck chair admiring everyone else's hard work." She was 40 years old, with her hair cut in a geometrically precise bob that emphasised her slender neck. She was beautiful, somewhat intense, and clearly had wonderful dress sense. "Oh well," Coral said with a smile. "We all like doing that." "My flat has no garden, thank goodness." Gail began separating the pile of plates as, behind the barbecue, Dan waved his tongs like a conductor and started singing along to the music playing on the sound system. "So you won't be helping Declan out with the one at Weaver's cottage?" "Ha! Not a chance!" Declan had brought Gail down this afternoon and shown her the work that was being carried out on the property. She grimaced slightly. "It still needs an awful lot doing to it." "Ah, but it'll be worth it in the end. And he won't have any trouble selling it on or renting it out," said Coral. Aware of Gail's cool gaze upon her, she felt the tension ramping up. "There's always a market for nicely done-up cottages in a picturesque setting, and people in Stanton Langley are friendly. It's a great village." "So Declan keeps telling me." Gail paused, her tone measured. "To be honest, I wondered what was going on at first. When he received that letter out of the blue from Lily, I thought maybe he was her father and wasn't admitting it." Halfway down the garden, with the rays from the setting sun streaming through the high branches, Lily was showing Declan how she used to climb trees as a child. As they watched her, 15 feet off the ground, she hooked her legs over a swaying horizontal branch and hung upside down like a monkey. A monkey wearing jeans, silver hoop earrings and flip-flops. "Oh, Jesus!" cried Declan, shielding his eyes from the sun's glare as he gazed up in horror. "Don't do that! Come down!" "I spent years telling her that," Coral said fondly. "Never made a blind bit of difference. Nick used to call her half child, half orangutan. And no," she went on, "Declan isn't her father. But don't they get on well? There's a real connection between them, and it's been fantastic for Lily meeting someone who meant so much to her mum." "I suppose it must be." Gail softened slightly. "It's so lovely seeing them together. I think it means a lot to Declan too, what with him not having any children of his own." "So far," said Gail. "Oh." Coral's heart broke into a gallop. Her gaze slid to the glass of iced sparkling water in Gail's manicured hand, the swell of her breasts beneath the crisply cut lilac linen dress. Were they usually smaller than that? And did the fact that Declan hadn't so much as mentioned it mean he didn't yet know? Then she became aware that Gail's head was tilted like a bird's and she was being observed with a mixture of triumph and amusement. "I'm not pregnant, if that's what you're thinking." The glossy, expertly low-lighted bob swung from side to side, and her mouth opened to reveal dazzlingly white teeth. "The reason I'm drinking water is because I'm driving us back to London tonight." Picking up one of the plates, Gail began helping herself to food from the various bowls arranged along the table. Is the dressing on the salad oil-free? No, I'm afraid not. Oh, okay. I could do you some, Coral offered helplessly because Gail was clearly disappointed. Thank you, that would be great. Sorry if it's boring, but I like to take care of myself. Gail followed her into the kitchen. I can see that. You have a fantastic figure. I know. Well, so do you. Was your husband overweight? Coral was already tearing up fresh lettuce, throwing it into a bowl. She turned, surprised. Nick? No. Oh, I just wondered. What with him dying so young of a heart attack? Gail shrugged. It generally happens to people who eat too much. Well, not in Nick's case. Sorry, am I being a bit blunt? I don't mean to be. Picking up a bottle of balsamic vinegar, Gail coated the torn lettuce leaves. If Gail could do it, so could she. Feeling terribly brave, Coral said, So, are you and Declan trying for a baby? Gail added cherry tomatoes, cooked asparagus and discs of cucumber to the salad. I'm considering it. I suspect Declan regrets not having had children before. He'd be a fantastic father, don't you think? What was she meant to say to that? Coral nodded. I'm sure he would, she murmured, and if that's what you want too. Oh, well, I love Declan. Gail shrugged elegantly. That's the main reason I'd be doing it. Babies aren't really my cup of tea, but if that's what he wants, I'm happy to give it a go. You never know, it might not be as bad as people make out. Coral was taken aback. What if it is? Gail shrugged. Lots of women think they don't want children, and then when it all starts happening, they change their mind. My cousin was the same as me, and she's got 3 now. So it all worked out okay in the end. Coral blinked. Right. Do you find Declan attractive? Said Gail. Okay, hang on, what did she just say? Coral frowned, assuming she'd somehow misheard. Sorry? Gail repeated it. Declan, do you find him attractive? Mortified, Coral shook her head. No, why? No particular reason, just interested. Gail was watching her with a perfectly pleasant smile on her face. The thing is, and I think most people would agree with me, Declan is a very attractive man. So I suppose I'm wondering why you don't think so. Which on the surface sounded completely plausible, but Coral was almost sure she wasn't imagining the unspoken subtext, as if Gail were perfectly well aware of Coral's experimental crush on him, and was subtly letting her know that she knew. Which in turn made Coral wonder, with a shudder of embarrassment, if Declan knew too. Outside in the garden, they could hear Lily and Dan bellowing discordantly along together with Alicia Keys. No one, no one, no one. Coincidentally, it had been one of Nick's favourite songs too. He used to sing it at the top of his voice in the shower. Except it wasn't a coincidence, Coral corrected herself. The CD was being played because she'd bought it for Nick years ago, and it has since become a treasured part of their collection. Oh, Nick. I loved my husband very much, she told Gail. I still do. I suppose that's the reason I don't find other men attractive. Are you listening, Nick? Can you hear me telling a barefaced lie and using you as my excuse for doing it? Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I hope you don't mind too much. The good thing was, if he was somehow watching and listening, she thought he would understand and be fine with it. The bad thing was, Gail was giving her the kind of look that signalled she wasn't convinced. What was it they used to do with a woman in the olden days if she was suspected of being a witch? Throw her into water, and if she drowned, she was innocent, and if she floated, she was found guilty, which meant they'd then burn her at the stake. Suppressing a shiver and hoping Gail wouldn't try this method to test her out, Coral held up the bowl of salad. Is there anything else you'd like? Yes, for you to stop fancying Declan. Gail didn't actually say this, thank goodness, but the mere idea that she could be thinking it was enough to send prickles of alarm down Coral's neck and spine. No, that's perfect, thank you. She took the bowl. Sorry to be a nuisance. You aren't a nuisance at all. Aren't I? With a small, enigmatic smile that prompted yet more tremors of unease, Gail said, Well, I do hope not. Chapter 31. They headed back out to rejoin the others in the garden. Everyone was loading up their plates now. Dan was piling medium-rare fillet steaks into a dish, Patsy was picking the bigger slices of chili out of her rice and giving them to Lily, and Gail was chatting to Eddie about her elderly male next-door neighbour, who had once acted on the stage with Joanna Lumley and had been helplessly besotted with her ever since. Ooh, creme fraiche! Reaching past Gail, Patsy helped herself to a generous spoonful and dolloped it on her spicy rice. Declan! She offered to do the same for him. Gail said, People always think creme fraiche is healthier than normal double cream, but it isn't, you know, just as many calories. And every bit as delicious, Patsy said happily as she tucked in. Coral glanced over at Declan, and for a split second their eyes locked. He winked at her, but in a way that indicated good-natured acceptance of other people's passions and foibles, rather than as a signal of anything more salacious. Oh, but the wink and that smile. Just seeing him here. How could it all have such an effect on her? Declan made her happy, Coral realised. Really happy. Her stomach lurched with longing, and she wished more desperately than ever that this situation could have been different. Because it was all very well telling yourself it was just a practice crush and you'd keep it under control, but it was turning out not to be that easy after all. Her mouth bone dry, Coral realised how idiotic she'd been, like someone deciding they'd try taking crack cocaine just the once and everything would be fine because all they had to do was make sure they didn't become addicted. Her gaze veered helplessly back towards Declan, who was now chatting to Patsy. It was too late. It had happened. She was hopelessly hooked on Declan Madison, with no way of getting herself unhooked. And it was scary as Chicken! Coral jumped, her left knee jerking against the edge of the table so that one of the almost empty wine bottles toppled sideways, splashing drops of red wine across the white tablecloth. As if she weren't already agonisingly aware of the mess she'd gone and got herself into. Whoops! Lily stood the bottle upright and offered Coral the plate in her other hand. Having some chicken? Lemon on the left, bourbon on the right. Could she even eat anything? Coral said. Just a small piece, thanks. I'm waiting for Dan to grill the tiger prawns. Your wish is my command, Dan called across. They're ready. Bring your plate over here. And now he was plying her with enormous marinated prawns while gusts of smoke stung her eyes and she was forced to rub them, forgetting she was wearing mascara. Your makeup's run. Dan passed her one of the soft paper napkins from the pile at his side. So, of course, as Coral was blinking and dabbing beneath her eyes, Gail spotted her and came hurrying over. Oh no, are you all right? I hope asking you about your husband didn't upset you. She sounded genuinely concerned. I'm so sorry. Here, you've missed a bit. Let me help. Finally, all the food was served and everyone was seated around the table. Citronella candles flickering in silver holders were keeping the mosquitoes at bay. The music had been changed to Bastille, and Declan was popping the cork on a bottle of Perrier Jouet. A toast, he said when the foaming contents had been divided between them. Everyone raised their glasses. To new friends and old. Declan clinked his glass against Dan's and everyone else followed suit. 4 weeks ago you'd never even heard of Stanton Langley, Lily reminded him. Can you believe it? 4 weeks ago I'd never heard of you. He grinned at her. I walked past the cottage yesterday, said Eddie. Saw all the work going on. Pretty amazing how much they've managed to get done in a week. They're moving fast. I'm going to be spending more time here myself, project managing. Declan dunked a tiger prawn in saffron mayonnaise. I'm planning to come down again next weekend and stay for the week, make sure everything keeps on course. Where will you stay? Said Patsy. At a cottage, it's fine. Declan shrugged. We'll have the new floor down by then, not a problem. But it wouldn't be comfortable, Lily protested. Why suffer if you don't need to? That's just crazy. You can stay here. Oh, no, please don't. Coral pressed her knees together beneath the table to stop them juddering uncontrollably. Convinced she was being watched by Gail and unable to meet anyone's gaze, she pretended to be absorbed in the task of batting away an insect above her head. Can't he? Lily was addressing her, clearly on a mission. Wouldn't that make perfect sense? Declan doesn't need to stay in a half-finished cottage and sleep on the floor. He can stay in our spare room. Oh, look, I don't want to put you out. Out of the corner of her eye, Coral could see Declan shaking his head, not wanting to be a nuisance. Next to him, Gail had put down her forkful of chicken. Oh, help. If she didn't say something in the next quarter of a second, things were going to get awkward. But she couldn't say yes. and she definitely couldn't say no. "You wouldn't be putting us out," Lily declared. "Of course you must stay with us." "Oh, this mosquito! These citronella candles aren't working at all." Flapping her napkin at the troublesome non-existent insect, Coral said, "Of course he can stay, absolutely. I won't be here, which is a shame, but that doesn't matter, does it?" She flashed a bright smile across the table at Declan. "You'll have Lily to look after you." Lily was looking baffled. "Why won't you be here? Where are you going?" Deep breath. "To the south of France, Grimaud." "What?" Lily's eyes widened. "You mean that magazine piece I showed you? Really?" "Really." Coral nodded, light-headed with relief at having successfully removed herself from the situation that had prompted her snap decision. "Well, I need to double-check first that Marty and his brother can cover for me here, which is why I hadn't mentioned anything yet. But I'm sure they'll be able to do it. When you showed me the article, I remembered how much I used to enjoy it, and I suddenly realised I would like to go. So I phoned them up this afternoon to check they still had spaces. And they have." She gave a little shrug. "I decided I'd book a place on the course." In actual fact, all she'd done was sign up for the company's newsletter, but they'd promptly emailed her with enticing prices for next week's holiday, so with a bit of luck, there were still places available. "Oh well, looked like she'd better book herself in now, pronto." "Yay, that's brilliant!" Lily clapped her hands with delight. "I'm so pleased." "Well, now I'm intrigued," said Gail. "What kind of course is this?" Coral's shoulders had relaxed. Speaking to Gail was suddenly a million times easier now the immediate danger had passed. "It's an art course for people who want to draw and paint. I used to go when Nick was alive. They have a couple of tutors there, and it's always really friendly and relaxed. You spend your days painting outside, then in the evenings everyone eats and socialises together. I haven't been on one since Nick died, but when Lily showed me the magazine, I decided that the time has come." And who knows, she thought, now that she'd been pushed into going, she might enjoy it and be glad it had happened. "So you're an artist?" Eddie was sounding interested. "Hidden talents?" "Oh no, nothing like that." Embarrassed, Coral shook her head. "I'm not very good." "Yes, she is," Lily chimed in, ever loyal. "Do you sell your work?" said Gail. "God, no." Gail was looking baffled. "So why'd you do it then?" Next to her, Declan said, "Because she enjoys painting, I imagine." "She gives them to friends," said Lily defensively. "They're brilliant." She turned to Eddie. "The garden scene up on the wall in Patsy's living room, that's one of Coral's. She used to paint all the time." Eddie was suitably impressed. "You're really good." Coral smiled at him. "It's been almost 3 years since I last picked up a paintbrush, so we'll have to see if I can still do it."
End of CD 6. CD 7.
"Oh Lord, did I sound rude? Ignore me," said Gail. "I've just never been able to understand why people choose to spend hours and hours on a hobby that doesn't bring them any financial or physical reward." She helped herself to more rice salad. "Still, each to their own. We're all different, aren't we? If I'm no good at something, I don't do it. I'd far rather play to my strengths." She shrugged. "But that's just me." Eddie's phone began to ring and he glanced at the screen. "Damn, it's my manager. He wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. I better see what he wants." Pushing back his chair and moving away from the table, he answered the call. He listened in silence for a couple of minutes, then murmured a few words and hung up. "Lily?" Lily twisted round on her seat to look at him. "Yes?" Coral had already sensed from Eddie's expression that the news wasn't good. Her stomach contracted with apprehension as she watched him rest his hand on Lily's bare shoulder. "Your biological father's name is Keir Bourne, is that right?" Lily stared. Finally she nodded. "That's right." "Sorry. He sold his story to one of the Sunday papers." Coral's hand covered her mouth. Lily's eyes were huge, her face suddenly pale and tight. "You mean the one about how he behaved like an absolute bastard, dumped my mum and never once bothered to come and see me? Wow, that's a great story." Her voice dripped with derision. "He's the scum of the earth and he actually wants everyone to know it." Eddie exhaled. "Apparently he wants to meet you, and he needed you to hear his side of the story. He says it's time you knew the truth." "We already know the truth," said Lily. Across the table, a glass slid out of Patsy's hand and landed on the edge of her plate with a crack. Chapter 32. 12 years ago. Stanton Langley had never looked more Christmassy, and Patsy had never felt less festive. Why did stuff like this always seem to happen to her? Had she actually been a complete monster in a previous life? Because it sometimes felt like it. As ever, she hadn't seen it coming. 2 weeks ago, she and Alex had been a normal, happy couple, getting on as well together as any couple and looking forward to their holiday in Tenerife. Well, Alex was still looking forward to his holiday in Tenerife because he was on his way to the airport right now, at this very minute, with bloody Alice Sawyer, who was his brand new girlfriend. Instead of with her, Patsy, whom he'd so unceremoniously dumped 2 days ago because, get this, she was just too good for him. Yes, he'd actually had the brass neck to utter those words, right before admitting that he was now seeing Alice, who had a far smaller brain than she did, but much bigger boobs. So now here she was in the middle of December, single once more, not to mention despairing, disillusioned and a tiny bit bitter, because everyone else had another half and there was nothing guaranteed to make you feel more lonely at Christmas than being the only unattached person you knew. "I'm 23 years old. I've been on a diet and lost a whole stone, and I've bought myself the most gorgeous turquoise bikini, which no one is now going to get to see." Not to mention the additional frustration that she'd taken a week's precious annual leave from the salon and no longer had anything to do during it. It was 2:00 in the afternoon when Patsy first noticed the man. He was sitting at a table in the window of the cafe, drinking coffee and gazing out at the passers-by. He was in his mid-30s at a guess, wearing a charcoal grey shirt and a smart mulberry red sweater. His hair was dark, he had nice eyes, and when he caught Patsy's eye, he smiled slightly. Not in a creepy way, though, just a normal, friendly acknowledgement that she'd seen him and he'd seen her. When you lived in a village, it was perfectly usual to smile at strangers. In the newsagents, Patsy bought a packet of chewing gum and a copy of Cosmopolitan. The shout line on the cover was, "New Year, New You," which seemed like an enticing idea. On her way back down the high street, she saw that the man in the mulberry jumper was still sitting there. By chance, Patsy's stomach was rumbling, and the cafe happened to sell her favourite pan of raisins. As she pushed through the door, bugger the diet, the old-fashioned bell above it went ting-a-ting-a-ting, and the man was smiling again, only this time to himself. Oh God, was she being too obvious? Was he laughing at her? Flushing, Patsy marched up to the counter and said, "Just a pan of raisin, please, to take away." When she'd paid, she turned to leave, embarrassed now and deliberately avoiding looking at the occupant of the table over by the window, until he said, "Before you go, can I just tell you why I was smiling?" "Fire away," Patsy shrugged as if she wasn't remotely interested. "I watched one of my favourite films on TV the other night. It's a Wonderful Life with James Stewart. Do you know it?" "Yes." Didn't everyone on the planet know that film? "When you opened the door just now, the bell made the exact sound it does in the film. Remember, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings." "Right." Patsy relaxed. "Yes, it does sound a bit like that." "Exactly like that. And when you came in here in your red coat and shiny boots, looking all happy and Christmassy, and it was as if you were—" "No, never mind, I can't say it." He shook his head, but his eyes were twinkling. "Well, you're wrong anyway," said Patsy, "if you think I'm happy, because I can promise you I'm not." He sat back on his chair. "You were smiling. You looked happy." "Crying on the inside, though." "What happened?" "The same thing that always happens. When you're me, anyway." She said it wryly. "It's the case of the vanishing boyfriend. Well, ex-boyfriend now." "Seriously? His loss? Can I ask you a question?" "Of course." Patsy held her breath. What was it going to be? "That bus stop across the road, is that the only one in the village, or is there another one I've missed?" Okay, not the question she'd expected, but easy enough to answer. No, just that one. Why? He shrugged. I'm waiting for someone. Don't want to miss them. Can I ask you another question? About the timetable. It's not exactly Piccadilly Circus around here. We only have one bus an hour coming through. He inclined his head. Actually, I was going to ask if you'd like to sit down and let me buy you a coffee. His name was Kevin Lester, Patsy learned. He was 36 years old, lived in Slough and owned a small engineering company. He was divorced, keen on mountaineering and partial to eating out in nice restaurants. In his spare time, he helped to raise funds for animal charities. If he didn't work such long hours, he'd definitely have a dog. And the reason for his presence in Stanton Langley was because his eccentric Aunt Ethel had announced that she wanted to meet him here today. She's as mad as a box of frogs, he explained. Keeps changing her surname, so we don't even know where she's living now. But every year or two she gets in touch and tells me where to come so we can catch up and I can make sure she's okay. She phoned me the other evening and said I should be here this afternoon, that she'd arrive on the bus. Except she didn't specify which bus. Par for the course with Ethel. But she would definitely turn up, said Patsy. Kevin shrugged. Might not. You never can tell. One time after she didn't arrive, she wrote to let me know she'd decided on a whim to visit Longleat instead to see if Lord Bath wanted another wifelet. Oh, God. And did he? Apparently not. Anyway, tell me all about you. And so she did. He was a good listener, genuinely interested in asking lots of questions. Patsy told him about her unfortunate past history with boyfriends, but was careful to make it fun and amusing so she didn't sound like too much of a tragic loser. She talked about her hairdressing job in Cheltenham, the people she worked with in the salon, and her friends here in the village. And as the minutes slid by, she found herself warming to Kevin Lester more and more. At 4 o'clock, they went outside at Patsy's insistence and waited for the next bus to arrive, because if he wasn't standing out there on the pavement, she explained, Aunt Ethel might just decide to stay on the bus. My brother will be on this one, she added, coming home from school. Just warning you now, if he sees us together and makes a smart comment, don't take any notice. 5 minutes later, the bus trundled into view. It pulled up with a discordant shriek of brakes and the doors concertinaed open. Fingers crossed, said Patsy as Kevin put on a pair of dark-rimmed spectacles. I know, crazy, he said, catching her look of surprise. But if I'm not wearing them, Ethel won't recognise me. Except there was no Aunt Ethel on the bus. Patsy was disappointed. She'd been looking forward to seeing what a 70-something rejected wifelet looked like. Several of the older villagers, back from a day of Christmas shopping, climbed carefully down the steps with their collections of carrier bags. Then the school children bounced off the bus, in high spirits because it was almost the end of term, and normal lessons had given way to having fun. Hiya! Lily greeted Patsy with enthusiasm. Not catching the bus, are you? What's up? Is your car breaking down? Patsy shook her head. This is Kevin. I was just keeping him company while he waited for his aunt, but she isn't on this bus. Look at the two of you, she added, tutting at Lily and Dan. Not even wearing coats. It isn't cold, Lily protested, arms spread wide to prove just how uncold it was. Patsy smiled because as a teenager she'd been exactly the same, and as if to prove that it was cold, snowflakes had begun to spiral lazily down from the darkening grey sky. You two are a lost cause. Turning to Kevin, she explained, That's my little brother Dan. Little brother was a joke. At 15, he was already taller than her. And this is Lily, who I used to babysit. Kevin nodded briefly and said, Hi, in a vague kind of way. Pausing to adjust his glasses, he added, Been to school, then? Which was possibly one of the most redundant questions of all time, but some men simply didn't know how to speak to teenagers. No. Dan glanced down at his white school shirt, loosened school tie and grey school trousers. I've been scuba diving. He jerked a thumb at Lily. And she's been to a fancy dress party. Don't worry, just ignore him. Lily shook her head sympathetically at Kevin. He thinks he's hilarious. Excuse me, I am hilarious? Dan deftly snatched the open packet of fruit pastels from her left hand and removed the top one, holding it between his finger and thumb as if it were a priceless diamond. Ooh, my favourite. Not that one! Give it back! You can take a green one, but you're not having the red. And that was it. They were off. Lily chasing Dan across the road and along the pavement on the other side as he darted around her, staying just out of reach. Lily's blonde curls bounced around her shoulders as she took an almighty swing at him with her heavy school rucksack and finally managed to grab the fruit pastels back. "Help! Dial 999, call the police!" Dan was doubled up with laughter. "I'm being attacked by a lunatic!" "They're like that all the time." Patsy rolled her eyes fondly. "It never stops." When Lily and Dan had disappeared through the gates of Goldstone House, she said, "What are you going to do now? Wait for the next bus?" "I have to. Just one more. Honestly, Aunt Ethel does my head in." Kevin paused, his smile rueful. "Although on the bright side, I've met you." They gazed at each other for several seconds as the snow gathered pace and began to fall harder around them. The street lamps were coming on now. The sky was growing darker by the minute, and someone inside the Star Inn had just switched on the strings of coloured fairy lights that decorated the front of the pub. "I think I've had enough coffee for one day," said Kevin. "I might try that place just for a change of scenery. It looks nice." Patsy nodded, her cold hands shoved deep inside the pockets of her red wool coat. "It is nice. And you have to be anywhere? I mean, things to do, people to see." She had nothing to do, nowhere else she needed to be, other than Tenerife, obviously. She shook her head. "No." Snowflakes were landing on the lenses of Kevin's spectacles and sliding down the glass. She added, "You can take those off again now." He smiled, did as he was told, then said, "Come on, let's go." As they crossed the rapidly whitening road, a blue Fiesta drove by with festive music booming out of it. Stealing a glance at Kevin's profile, Patsy wondered how prophetic it was that the song playing was Mariah Carey's jaunty classic, "All I Want for Christmas Is You." By 9 o'clock in the evening, Patsy's edges were pleasantly blurred. She wasn't drunk, just happily relaxed. Tucked into a cosy corner of the pub, she and Kevin had shared a bottle of red wine, eaten chicken casserole and talked non-stop for hours. And although neither of them had referred to it, the mutual attraction between them was growing at a rate of knots. The body language was there, the not very accidental physical contact inescapable. Patsy's cheeks ached from smiling, her foot beneath the old oak table was resting against Kevin's, and she'd long since decided that the age gap between them wasn't too great after all. Because when you scrolled through her past experiences with boys her own age, well, look how they'd turned out. Maybe an older man was just what she needed. And it wasn't as if Kevin was ancient. He was 36, she was 23. And the words of the Mariah Carey song were still playing on a loop in her brain. All she wanted for Christmas could be sitting in front of her right now. Needless to say, Aunt Ethel hadn't been on the 5 o'clock bus. Thank goodness. Because if she had been, Kevin would have spent the last few hours with his mad aunt instead of with her. They ordered another bottle of delicious Barolo, and Patsy said, "You're not going to be able to drive home tonight?" Kevin shrugged. "I'll just have to sleep in my car." He was probably joking, but Patsy said, "You can't do that, you'll freeze to death." "This is true." He peered out through the window at the snow still falling steadily outside. "Would you happen to have a sofa I could spend the night on?" Patsy hesitated. She did, but she also had a nosy mother, not to mention a smart aleck 15-year-old brother. Furthermore, she suspected Kevin was hoping for more than a sofa. "That could be awkward. What with family?" "Oh, I see, right. There's a hotel down the road, the Valentine." Is that the 4-star one I drove past on my way here? It might cost a bit more than I can afford. Is there a cheap B&B anywhere nearby?" There was a cheap B&B at the other end of the high street. It was run by the scariest person in the Cotswolds, a bossy, judgmental woman in her 60s called Beatrice, who disapproved enormously of sex before marriage. And Kevin's index finger was now idly stroking the inside of Patsy's wrist, sending mini electricity zings shooting all the way up her arm. "What are you thinking?" His voice was low, his gaze fixed on hers. "There is a B&B, but it's not very nice," Patsy fibbed. God, Beatrice would go ballistic if she knew she'd said that. "And the landlady is quite..." She pulled a face. Strict? You mean she wouldn't approve of visitors? She definitely wouldn't approve of visitors. They were in a quiet corner of the pub. No one was watching them. Kevin leaned across the table, gently pulled her forward to meet him halfway, and kissed her on the mouth. Oh, wow. More zings, mega zings. All I want for Christmas is you. Sitting back but keeping hold of her hand, Kevin said, That isn't ideal then. Maybe I should splash out on the hotel. He smiled slowly and rubbed his fingers across the back of her knuckles. You could stay with me if you'd like to. What do you think? Patsy's mouth was dry. Who knew? Maybe meeting Kevin today had been fate, designed to alter the course of her life. What if 20 years from now, telling people the story of how they'd first got together became their well-honed party piece? She could almost hear the older version of Kevin saying the words. And to think, if she hadn't said yes, we might never have seen each other again after that night. Imagine that. Seize the moment. Go on, do it. You can't let this chance slip by. Patsy took a deep breath. Okay, I'd like that. Kevin broke into a smile. That's good news, because I don't much like staying in strange hotel rooms on my own. Using the payphone out in the corridor, they looked up the number of the Valentine in the yellow pages. Kevin called the hotel and booked a double room. Next, Patsy phoned home and told her mother she'd be staying with a friend that night. Well, it wasn't a lie, was it? Then they recorked the still almost full bottle of red wine, slid it into Patsy's oversized shoulder bag and left the pub. The walk along the high street was cold but completely magical. Snow tumbled out of the ink-black sky and multicoloured lights and decorated Christmas trees glittered in the windows of the shops and houses they passed. Their breath formed opaque clouds of condensation and crisp, dry snow squeaked beneath their feet. Kevin was keeping his arm around her to make sure she didn't slip and fall. He was such a gentleman and he had such a nice smile. It felt like being in a film. Just so you know, Patsy felt the need to say it as they passed the newsagent's where she'd bought her copy of Cosmo. I've never done this before. I mean, not on the first night. I'm not that kind of girl. I know. Kevin paused to kiss her briefly, his nose cold against her cheek. I can tell. But this is different. This is special. He could feel it too, it wasn't just her. Patsy's heart soared as she whispered, I think you're right. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the sound of a toilet being flushed in the next room woke Patsy from sleep. For a split second, she wondered where she was. Then, remembering, she smiled and snuggled closer to Kevin, who was lying on his side facing away from her. They'd had such a wonderful evening. Any worries that she'd been making a mistake had been swept away. They'd had another glass of wine each, made love, then talked some more, sharing the rest of the bottle of Barolo before making love again. He was such a genuinely nice person. He no longer seemed several years older than her. He was just Kevin. Kevin Lester. Patsy Lester. It sounded so right. Far better than Alex's surname. Much as she'd liked Alex, if they had ended up getting married, she'd have been Patsy Bacon, which, let's face it, wasn't ideal. So many puns, so little time. But Patsy Lester was fine. It was a good name. And okay, maybe this was jumping the gun, but it wasn't as if anyone would ever know she'd been thinking it. She ran her hand lightly over his back, not enough to wake him, just to feel the warmth of his skin. Here they were, naked together on the first night of their relationship. She was never going to forget. A door slammed on the next floor and Kevin's arm twitched. He lifted his head for a moment, then let it fall back onto the pillow. Go back to bed, he mumbled. Patsy grinned in the darkness. People who talked in their sleep were always entertaining. When a few seconds had passed, she reached up behind her and knocked the wooden headboard with her knuckles. Kevin let out a groan. Tan, she's trying to get in. You sort it out. Put her back to bed. Patsy stopped grinning. What? Kevin shifted in his sleep and began to snore. Seriously, what? Because people sometimes talked rubbish when they were asleep, muttering about catching potatoes and flying with dragons. But Kevin's words were rather more prosaic than that. Who was Tan? And who did she need to put back to bed? Oblivious to the snoring, Patsy lay on her back and stared up at the ceiling. Okay, Tan could be his ex-girlfriend, someone with a small daughter. That was completely feasible. Of course it was. Wasn't it? Her toes were so tense they were in danger of seizing up with cramp. No way could she get back to sleep now she'd heard him say those things. At least not until she'd found out the meaning behind them. Patsy eased herself away from Kevin's sleeping form and slid silently out of bed. She wrapped herself in one of the white toweling dressing gowns hanging out behind the door, then, finding Kevin's trousers thrown over the armchair by the window, stealthily removed his wallet from the back pocket. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Just breathe. Locking herself in the bathroom, Patsy glanced at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. Tousled bed hair, slightly smudged makeup and anxious eyebrows. Don't be anxious. There has to be a perfectly simple explanation for what you heard him say. She perched on the edge of the bath, gazed at the brown leather wallet in her lap, then took a deep breath and opened it. Wake up! Wake up! Patsy was trembling with fury. She gave the double bed a kick and almost broke her toe. Hey! Opening his eyes and rolling over onto his back, Kevin blinked in sleepy confusion. Except his name wasn't Kevin. Wake up and answer the phone, said Patsy. Your wife wants to know why you haven't come home tonight. What? That did the trick. He sat up, searched the room for the phone and saw it sitting silently on the bedside table with the receiver in place. You seem to have stolen someone else's wallet. Patsy held it up, still shaking. Someone by the name of Keir? She took out the Visa debit card and spun it across the bed at him. Keir Bourne? The MasterCard followed it, bouncing off his chest. And guess what? He even looks like you. She aimed a driving licence at his head, followed by a small colour photograph of him with a pretty red-haired woman and a girl with pigtails who looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. And he has a wife and a child. Imagine that. You bastard. OK, stop it. You had no right to go through my wallet. You had no right to tell me your name was Kevin Lester. It was warm in the room, but Patsy's teeth were chattering violently. You lied to me. You've been lying to me from the word go. Look, I'll marry, but it's a disaster. We're only staying together until Sash is a bit older. As soon as she's settled at school, we'll make the break. You don't live in Slough, Patsy pointed out. You live in Milton Keynes. It says so on your driver's licence. Look, I'm sorry. Who's Kevin Lester? He sighed. Just someone I was friends with at school. Does Mad Aunt Ethel even exist? Patsy paused. No, of course she doesn't. You made her up. Silence. Keir Bourne looked away. And in case you're wondering, I do know who you are, said Patsy, which means I know why you came here to Stanton Langley. More silence, broken only by the sound of her own uneven breathing. And now I hate myself. I feel so stupid. Tears filled her eyes, then slid down her cheeks and dripped onto her bare feet. I feel grubby and gullible and used. Well, you shouldn't, said Keir, because I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Not this between you and me. I came here for one reason, a completely different reason, and I didn't expect to meet you, but I did. All of this, the way I feel about you and the way you felt about me, it was real. He swallowed, as if on the brink of tears himself. It is real. Patsy's voice broke. You're Lily's father. Yes. You dumped Jo. She was all alone and pregnant, and you abandoned her. Keir shook his head sorrowfully. No, you've got it all wrong. It wasn't my fault. You're lying again. Sobbing now, she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of the white dressing gown. I'm not, I swear. Please listen to me, Keir said with anguish in his eyes. Just let me explain. Chapter 33. 12 years on from that night, the very, very worst of her life, Patsy wondered if this one was about to eclipse it. All around her at the table in the garden of Goldstone House, the rest of them were discussing the situation with varying degrees of outrage and disgust. The Sunday edition of the newspaper was yet to appear online. They were waiting for it to be uploaded within the next hour or so. And who could say what might be revealed when it did? Patsy felt sick. For all this time, she'd guarded her deepest, darkest, and most shameful secret. At first, she'd lived in perpetual fear that one way or another the truth would come out. Then, as the years had rolled by, the terror had lessened to a low-level, rumbling anxiety. Lily had continued to be completely uninterested in meeting her biological father, and that had been the best news of all. But now... but now Keir was wanting to make contact with his daughter, and instead of simply writing to her, he'd chosen to do it via the medium of a national newspaper. God alone knew what he might be about to say. "Are you okay?" Coral was looking at her with concern. "I'm afraid... well, not really. I'm feeling a bit ill." Patsy's hand shook as she took a sip of water and the rim of the tumbler clattered against her teeth. "You do look pale," said Eddie. "Don't try and blame my barbecuing skills," Dan announced. "It's too soon for food poisoning." Coral said, "It might be one of those bugs." "I think it could be that." Hating herself even more, Patsy nodded weakly. "I've been feeling a bit yuck for a few hours, but it's getting worse." "Poor you!" Lily exclaimed. "And you've been trying so hard to pretend nothing's wrong. If you feel sick, I bet you're dying to go home." "I am feeling sick." Patsy put the tumbler down. "I think I probably should go. Sorry." "Don't be silly. It's not your fault. Would you like me to walk you home?" Patsy said, "It's fine. Don't worry. You stay here." Lily's compassion was only making her feel worse. "I'd rather be on my own." She made stay-sitting gestures, but it was too late. Lily was already out of her chair. "You mustn't," Patsy protested as Lily hugged her. "You don't want to catch whatever I've got." "I won't. I never do." "Poor you," Lily said again. "I hope you feel better soon." Patsy had never felt more like Judas. Her throat tight with shame and self-loathing, she murmured, "Me too, I'm sorry." Lily smiled. "Will you stop saying that? You didn't do it on purpose." The shameful words echoed through Patsy's brain. "Oh, but I kind of did." The piece appeared on the newspaper's website at just gone midnight. As soon as Dan looked up from his phone and said, "It's there," Lily nodded and pushed back her chair. "I'll read it inside, won't be long." "Oh, darling, are you sure you don't want anyone with you?" Coral was looking concerned. Lily gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." In the kitchen, Lily sat down at the scrubbed oak table and opened the page on her iPad. It wasn't a case of being worried she might cry. She simply wanted to be able to concentrate and take it all in without being aware that everyone was watching her. All these years, the fact that she'd never once Googled Keir Bourne had been a source of great pride to Lily, proof that he was a nobody who meant nothing at all. The man had never shown any interest in her, so he was absolutely irrelevant to her life. What he'd done to her mum was disgusting and reprehensible, and he didn't deserve to be looked up or searched out in any way whatsoever. Lily had always refused to give him the satisfaction of finding out that she'd so much as typed his name into a search engine. A man like him was beyond contempt, and that was that. But had she been curious? Okay, yes, of course she had. And now that he'd made his move, she needed to know what he'd said. Forewarned is forearmed and all that. Willing herself to stay calm and detached, she twisted the crystal-studded bangle on her left wrist and looked at the photo that had just come up on the screen of the man who was her biological father. Keir Bourne had been photographed looking appropriately sincere and concerned, sitting in a chair whilst holding one of the photos of her that had appeared in last week's newspaper. He had short brown hair that was greying very slightly at the temples, defined eyebrows, dark eyes and the beginnings of a double chin. He wasn't ugly. You could tell he'd been good-looking when he was younger. And if she were being honest, although there wasn't any strikingly noticeable similarity, there was something about his forehead and jawline that was reminiscent of her own. No intense thud of recognition, though, thank goodness, and no sense of longing to meet him. Also good. Lily exhaled and realised she was still compulsively twirling her mother's bangle around her wrist. She knew from Coral that Keir Bourne had never liked having his photo taken. When her mum had been seeing him, he'd always turned away from the camera, shielding his face with his hand or simply ducking out of sight. She'd only ever seen 2 or 3 photographs of him, and they'd been poor quality snaps taken with a cheap throwaway camera. You'd never subsequently recognise him in real life. Plus, those snaps had been taken before she'd been born, when he was still in his early 20s. A quarter of a century had passed since then. Once a bastard, always a bastard. Okay, that was the first hurdle over. Bracing herself, Lily turned her attention from the photo to the text and began to read. A week ago, Lily Harper sprang to the public's attention when she rescued a runaway mouse from superstar Mira Knowles. Or maybe rescued Mira Knowles from a runaway mouse. Today we speak to Kia Bourne, who recognised Lily from the coverage as the daughter he's been deprived of knowing all these years, thanks to the impulsive actions of Lily's runaway mother, Jo. You mustn't blame her mum, Kia anxiously tells me when we meet in a cafe close to his home in Milton Keynes. She didn't mean to cause me all these years of heartache. I'm sure in her own mind Jo's intentions were good. We loved each other so much, though. I don't think she realised how deep my feelings for her were. It was the worst pain I've ever known when I found out she no longer wanted me in her and our daughter's life. He pauses to gaze at the photograph of Lily in his hand, then gathers himself to continue. But as the years passed, I did my best to build a new life of my own. I married and had another daughter, but was never able to forget Lily. How could I? She was my firstborn. Kia's voice breaks as he proceeds. Every single day I wondered how she was and if she was missing me. Then when Lily was 7 years old, I received a letter from Jo telling me she was dying of cancer and had made arrangements for our daughter to be cared for and brought up by friends of hers. I was devastated, naturally, but she insisted she didn't want me to contact her or Lily. And although it was like a knife in my chest, I felt I had no other choice than to go along with what Jo had decided. Once again, I was heartbroken. Seeing Lily on the front page of the papers and discovering she's now dating a mega celebrity makes me more proud than I can say, but it also tears me apart, knowing how many years of her life I've missed out on. More than anything, I wish we could meet and get to know each other properly. At this point, overcome with emotion, Kia wipes his eyes and asks for a drink of water. It's achingly clear how much his long-lost daughter means to him. Heaven knows, I'm a hard-nosed journalist, but even my heart goes out to this likeable man. When I suggest gently that Lily may wonder why he's left it until now to do this, Kia shakes his head and explains to me that this isn't the first time he's tried to make contact. In fact, he has met and spoken with Lily before. What? What? Although she didn't find out I was her father, he explains to me. My intention was to be discreet. I took the day off work and travelled to Stanton Langley in search of my daughter and met up with someone who knew her very well indeed. This person told me all about her but stressed that Lily was happy with the people she now knew as her parents and had been brainwashed over time into thinking the worst of me. I also met Lily herself and was struck by how comfortable and settled she seemed. She was beautiful, chatty and friendly, everything you could want a daughter to be. But 13 is a tricky age and, not wanting to cause upset and emotional trauma, I took the agonising decision not to reveal my identity. It was the hardest decision of my life. Now, though, 12 years on, I feel she deserves to know that I've always loved and missed her and that what I did was only ever for the best. If she can find it in her heart to meet me, I'd be the happiest man in the world. Lily sat at the table and skimmed over the words again. When the kitchen door was pushed open behind her, she knew from the rhythmic metallic clunk who it was. She quivered at the touch of Dan's hand on her bare shoulder. And now he was standing beside her, his good arm resting against her back. However you're feeling right now, it's okay to feel it. He gave her a reassuring squeeze. I have no idea how I feel, that's the weird thing. Lily shrugged and unthinkingly reached up to curl her fingers around his. It's like my mind's gone blank. It was also weird for there to be this amount of physical contact between them. Due to the nature of their friendship, they tended not to go in for touchy-feely gestures of concern or affection. A playful thump on the arm was more their kind of thing. Any memory of meeting him? Said Dan. Lily shook her head. None. But it's possible. It could have happened at any time. If I was 13, I was helping out in the yard whenever I wasn't at school. I suppose he spoke to me there. And who did he talk to? Who gave him all that personal information? No idea. I can't believe someone told him so much about me and kept it a secret all these years. She tilted her head to gaze up at him. Do you think Coral knew? No way. She's as shocked as you. Dan shook his head. She definitely didn't have any idea. Everyone's going to be wondering how I am. Lily rose to her feet. We should get back out there. Thanks for coming in. Hey, why wouldn't I? Any time. They were facing each other, Dan's jean-clad thigh resting against the side of the table, the characteristic spark of amusement missing for once from his dark eyes. The connection between them stretched all the way back through both their lives. He was as concerned about tonight's developments as she was. Overcome with gratitude and suddenly experiencing a rush of confused emotion, Lily wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his good shoulder. In turn, Dan's arm tightened around her and she felt the warmth of his breath against her ear. Don't worry, he murmured into her hair. Whatever happens, we'll get through this. And although Dan had a broken foot and a strapped-up arm, Lily knew that he was on her side and would defend her to the death. Although hopefully it wouldn't come to that. Before anyone else could burst in and misconstrue the situation, she took a step back. I know. Thank you. Come on, we better go. Chapter 34. The alarm was set for 8 the next morning. Dan, who had barely slept, lay in bed and watched the hands of the clock approach the moment the ear-splitting bell was due to go off. He'd broken his own strict rule last night, and now he knew how right he'd been to impose it all those years ago. The rule had been, no matter what the circumstances, never ever give in to temptation and get physically closer to Lily than you would to your bank manager. It had been simultaneously the best and worst experience of his life, and it must never be allowed to happen again. He'd been so desperately close to losing the last vestige of control and kissing Lily in the way he'd kissed her in his imagination more times than he'd ever dream of admitting to a living soul. 1 minute to 8. Mentally bracing himself for the blast of the alarm, he forced himself to stop thinking about nearly kissing Lily. They had far more important concerns today. There was every chance that her biological father might turn up. Patsy, too, had had precious little sleep. Alone in her bedroom, she had read the online piece in the paper, her stomach churning with fear at both Keir Bourne's words and the photograph of him 12 years on. He hadn't mentioned her by name, which was obviously a relief, but she was chillingly aware that she wasn't out of the woods yet. Poor Lily. Poor me. Except I don't deserve any sympathy, do I? No, you don't, none at all. All she wanted to do was stay in bed with the covers pulled over her head. Over at the Valentine, Eddie was packing up his belongings, ready to be collected and driven to Heathrow. I wish I didn't have to leave you like this. He paused and reached down to kiss Lily, who was dressed and sitting cross-legged on the king-size bed with her iPad, studying the online comments left by the newspaper's readers. It's okay, I'm a grown-up, I can cope. She returned the kiss. He had to fly over to New York for meetings, and they weren't the kind where you could call in sick with a croaky voice and cancel. You have your job, I have mine. Do you really need to work today? What if this guy turns up? This guy. It was how they'd been referring to Keir Bourne. Lily shrugged. If it's going to happen, it'll happen. I'm not going to hide from him. You should see the messages some people are leaving on here. Fascinated, she scrolled through a few more. Eddie said, Rule number 1, never ever read the online comments. They'll melt your brain. Does this girl think she's a celebrity now just because she caught a mouse? How pathetic that she is so desperate for attention she's making up stories like this. Wow, said Lily, and they managed to spell almost every word wrong. She was doing her best to laugh it off, but just knowing that someone actually thought she'd arranged the whole thing was a kick in the gut. Another one said, Why do dads always get the blame? Maybe the girl was just an ugly baby. Get over it. Next came, It's the woman's fault for getting herself up the duff in the first place. Below which someone had replied, Sexist pig. The next one said, Probably her mother smoked fags and was a cheating bitch and that's why he left, like my ex-missus. Followed by, How on earth is this news? Who are these people? Don't care. Well, quite. For a split second, Lily was tempted to reply, Hear, hear. But no, she mustn't. That way madness lay. She put down the iPad and sat back against the pillows, perfectly well aware that reading the comments was her way of trying to distract herself from what might happen later on today. A knot kept tightening in her stomach at the thought of finally coming face to face with Kia Bourne. At that moment her phone rang and Dan's name flashed up. She pressed answer. "Hey, you're awake." "I am, I know, it's like a miracle." His tone softened. "How are you?" The way he said it, the sound of his voice, made her feel the tiniest bit better. "Pairing up." "Oh God, isn't that what women do when they're having a baby? Don't tell me you've gone into labour." He might drive her nuts, but he'd always been able to make her smile. "That's bearing down. Shows how much you know about giving birth." Which caused Eddie, across the room, to pause a moment in the middle of folding his blue shirt. "Thank goodness," said Dan. "Are you still going into work?" "Of course." "Want me to keep you company?" Touched, Lily said, "Would you? That'd be great." "No problem, I'll see you in a bit." "How's Patsy this morning?" "Still not herself, she's staying in bed." Oh dear. Was there anything worse than feeling ill? "Poor thing," Lily said sympathetically. "Tell her I hope she feels better soon." By midday, Lily was discovering that the waiting for something to happen was the worst bit. Like the day your GCSE results were due to arrive, or that sick sense of dread as you sat in the dentist's waiting room about to have your wisdom teeth wrenched out. But that kind of physical pain was far easier to deal with. It hurt like hell for a bit, then gradually faded away and you knew the worst was over. Whereas this felt different and could have the potential to leave wounds that wouldn't heal. Because despite putting on a brave face and pretending she was fine, the nerves were really starting to kick in now. Beneath the surface, she was dreading hearing something she might not want to know. "Okay," murmured Dan when she went into the office to fetch the bubble wrap. He knew, of course. Other people might be fooled by her couldn't-care-less manner, but not Dan. His good hand brushed against hers as he passed her the roll, and that familiar tingle zipped up her arm. In a moment of weakness, Lily found herself pretending to lose her grip on the slippery plastic so that their fingers could briefly make contact again. Zing. Stupid, but it was just something she needed this morning. Every little helped. "Don't worry." Dan's voice was reassuring. "I'm here. You'll be fine." "I know." She met his gaze, saw the concern and compassion in those black-lashed dark eyes. "I just wish it would hurry up and happen." 40 minutes later, it did. Lily was hefting a stack of duck-egg blue glazed stone garden troughs into the back of a customer's battered old Jaguar when she realised she was being watched by a pretty blonde girl. When the girl turned her head to one side and Lily saw the pink streak in her hair, she knew. Dan had told her about his encounter with the journalist in Ted Wilson's shop. She finished loading the troughs into the Jaguar's boot and waved the driver off, then turned back to look at the girl. It was almost a relief to have the waiting over at last. "Hi, I'm Shaz. Looks like you know why I'm here." And now the girl was in front of her, beaming and enthusiastically shaking her hand. "It's so good to finally meet you." "Is he here now?" "Your dad?" "Kia Bourne," said Lily. "He is." Shaz nodded. "Oh, Lily, he's so looking forward to meeting you again. Properly this time. You have no idea how much it means to him." Lily swallowed. She didn't need to do this. She could walk away now, lock herself inside the house and refuse to come out. Nobody could force her to meet him. But that would give him more importance than he deserved. Allowing him to meet her and remaining detached would show him just how much of an irrelevance he was in her life. Plus, it would get it out of the way. Done and dusted. Then she could have her mild curiosity assuaged and go back to ignoring him once more. Even as these thoughts were spinning, for the millionth time, through her brain, Lily was aware of the sound of car doors slamming a short distance away, followed by footsteps crossing the road towards her. All of a sudden, a frantic horse race was starting up in her chest, and the thunder of galloping hooves threatened to drown out everything else. But on the outside, she remained calm. She turned, and there he was, the man whose photograph she'd seen in last week's newspaper, the man whose genes she shared. Without him, she wouldn't exist. And now he was here, heading towards her, and she was feeling nothing. Nothing at all. Good, that was good. She hadn't wanted to feel anything, and her wish had evidently been granted. Indifference was the order of the day. "Oh, Lily, my baby." As he said it, Keir Bourne tentatively held out his arms and Lily took a small step back. Something about the delivery of the words felt off, as if they'd been someone else's idea. She became aware of a small man with a huge Nikon taking photos from the other side of the road. Shaz, meanwhile, was watching and listening with her phone in her left hand and an avid smile on her face. To avoid a hug, Lily shook hands with Keir Bourne and said, "I don't remember meeting you before." "It wasn't for very long, just a few minutes. And it was 12 years ago, so why would you remember? But it's wonderful to see you again now. It's been like torture knowing I was missing out on so much of your life. Not a day's passed when I haven't thought about you, Lily. All these years I've dreamed of us getting to know each other. You're my flesh and blood, after all." Lily was struck by the irony that she felt more, so much more, when she'd first met Declan just a few short weeks ago. They might not share a bloodline, but the bond between them, the instinctive connection, had been there from the word go. People were stopping to see what was going on, to watch and listen to the family reunion that was being so assiduously recorded by the photographer. "Can we move somewhere more private?" Hearing the familiar rhythmic clunk of Dan's metal crutch on the pavement behind her, Lily realised that word of the meeting had spread and he'd come out to support her. Flashing him a look of gratitude over her shoulder, she turned back to Keir. "Follow me." "Can I come along too?" Shaz had her cheery but sympathetic face on. Lily shook her head. "No." "Darling," said Coral as Lily led Keir Bourne towards the gates of Goldstone House. "If you want me with you, just say." Her cool nod in Keir's direction indicated precisely what she thought of him. Lily was grateful, but there were too many customers. They couldn't all be left to fend for themselves. "It's okay, I'm taking Dan with me." Shaz said, "Well, if you're having Dan, surely Keir could have me in with him. I'll be as quiet as a mouse, I promise." The photographer was still clicking away alongside them, muttering "yes, yes" to himself each time he got a good shot. Shaz was giving Dan a hopeful smile. "Oh dear, how can I put this?" said Lily. "Still no." Chapter 35. "You're hurt," Keir said once the three of them were alone in the kitchen of Goldstone House. "I understand that. You've heard your mother's version of events, but you've never heard mine." "Go on then." Lily sat down at the kitchen table to keep some distance between them. He was well dressed, wearing a dark blue crew-neck sweater over a white shirt and dark grey trousers that looked brand new. Had he made the effort just for her? "Look, you have to understand how young we were. I was living at home, working for the family business. My parents went ballistic when they found out Jo was pregnant, and it was Jo's decision to take the money they gave her and disappear. I was the one who was abandoned," said Keir. "If she'd stayed with me in Exeter, we could have made a go of things. I know we could." "That's not what she told Coral," Lily said evenly. "But Coral wasn't there, was she? Listen, I'm sorry you lost your mum, but maybe it made life easier for her to tell people she'd been abandoned. Maybe it was her way of getting sympathy. Oh dear, I don't mean it badly, but perhaps she thought it was the best way to deal with a difficult situation. But she was a fantastic girl and I did love her." He gestured helplessly. "I'm just trying to explain that I know you think I'm the bad guy here, but what if I'm not as bad as you think?" Wasn't he? Lily didn't believe him. She wanted him to leave. But now that he was here, she also wanted to learn more details from him about her mum. "Tell me about how the two of you met." At least she could do this. Hearing the stories from Declan about his adventures with Jo in Barcelona had been such a joyful experience, creating brand new memories for her to treasure forever. Even if her mum's relationship with this other man had ended badly, their first months together must have been happy. Well, I suppose we were in a bar." "And?" said Lily. Keir looked baffled. Finally he shrugged. "We must have got chatting somehow. Then I'd have offered to buy her a drink. Then we'd have talked some more." "Do you remember?" said Lily. "Or are you just guessing?" "I kind of remember. It was 27 years ago," Keir protested. "But when you first meet a girl, that's what you do, isn't it?" "What was she wearing?" He frowned. Jeans? And some kind of top? Well, let's hope so, said Lily. He began to smile, then saw that she wasn't smiling back. Sorry, I'm not great at noticing clothes, but I know we really liked each other. At the end of the evening, we arranged to meet up again, and it went on from there. Lily said, What did you buy her for her birthday? I didn't know this was going to be 20 questions. He half laughed and gestured vaguely. A box of chocolates, I expect, and some flowers. What kind of chocolates did she like? Lily knew her mum had hated the dark kind. Black magic? It was like trying to drag memories out of a brick wall. Shaking her head in disbelief, Lily glanced across the kitchen at Dan, who murmured, Romantic. Look, I'm sorry if I'm not saying the right things here, but I'm doing my best. And I'm still your father. Kia took a deep breath. Can I just say, I'm glad you've had a good life. I'm sorry your mum died. And I'm so proud of you. Seeing you in the paper with Eddie Tesla was just... Is he here, by the way? I'd love to meet him. Shaz says if we could get a couple of photos of you, me and Eddie together, that would be... Oh my God! Anger flared in Lily. Is that why you're here? Is that all you care about, meeting Eddie? Hastily he shook his head. No, that was Shaz's idea, not mine. She was the one who wanted me to ask that. Of course she was, said Lily tightly. This isn't fair, said Kia. You're my daughter. I've wanted to get to know you for years. But you didn't, Lily retaliated. Because your mother thought it was for the best. I stayed away for that reason, for your benefit. She'd arranged your life and decided it wasn't going to include me. But that wasn't my fault. I'd have done anything to get to know you. I don't believe that for 1 minute. Well, it's true. Lily said coldly. Handy for you, too. If you'd been that keen, though, I'm sure you could have made some effort. She didn't even care. God only knew why she was arguing the point. The sooner he was out of here, the better. I did make the effort. Kia's jaw jutted. I came down here, remember, 12 years ago. Allegedly, said Lily. Who was to say he hadn't been lying about that too? I did. It was in December. I met you for a few minutes. He glanced over at Dan. I met you too. Dan raised an eyebrow. Right here? Was I working out in the yard? Said Lily. No, you just arrived home from school on the bus. You, Kia pointed at Dan, were pretty sarcastic. Then you both headed off and I carried on hearing all about you from this girl I'd met in the cafe. You asked a load of questions about me and she told you everything you wanted to know. Why would she even do that? Honestly, he broke into a smile at the memory, because she liked me. A lot. But this girl never told me you'd been here, said Lily. That makes no sense. Why wouldn't she? I don't know, maybe because she was embarrassed? Because she regretted what she'd done? This is bullshit, Dan broke in. None of it's true. He's bluffing, making the whole thing up. I'm not, said Kia. We spent the whole night together at the Valentine Hotel. The veneer of charm was sliding away. Had a very nice time, if you know what I mean. What a lowlife. So what was her name? Asked Lily. I can't remember. That's handy, isn't it? Said Dan. It's almost as if this mystery female never even existed. Oh, she existed, all right. The note of triumph was audible in Kia Bourne's voice. He was almost smirking now. And I may have forgotten her name, he went on directly addressing Dan, but I definitely remember that she was your sister. A stunned silence reverberated through the kitchen. Lily heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She waited for Kia Bourne to say, "Ha, fooled you," for it to have been his idea of a sick joke. But he wasn't laughing. Instead, he was looking decidedly pleased with himself. Across the room, practically vibrating with fury, Dan said, "You're a disgusting human being." "And a liar," said Lily. "Ah, you'd like it not to be true." Kia Bourne shifted on his chair. "But it is." "You don't even know her name," said Dan. "Oh, come on, from the look of you, I don't imagine you remember the name of every girl you've ever slept with." "Fuck off," said Dan. "How dare you? Patsy wouldn't touch you with a barge pole." Patsy, that's it, that's her name. She was the one who introduced you to me at the bus stop. I was wearing dark-rimmed glasses, said Kia. She was wearing a red coat. It was just starting to snow. Lily was barely breathing. The tiniest memory was beginning to unfurl, like a sprouting seed sending a tendril of green up through the earth. Patsy greeting them at the bus stop with a stranger in tow. A man in glasses who'd said something trivial to them, and Dan had given him a typically cheeky answer. It had been a cold afternoon and Patsy had protested that they should be wearing coats too. That was as far as Lily's memory went. She and Dan had run off down the road. Since that day, she hadn't given the chance encounter another thought. Dan had evidently been dredging up details of that same afternoon. He said suddenly, "You were there because you were waiting to meet someone off the bus, but they weren't on it." Pleased, Kia Bourne said. "Well done, see? I knew you could do it if you tried." "So you lied about that, and you lied to Patsy as well. She had no idea who you were." Lily felt sick. It was hideous enough to think of this man flirting with Patsy, let alone anything more intimate happening between them. But it was beginning to seem as if it might actually be true. God, poor Patsy. When she found out, she'd be devastated. Maybe they wouldn't tell her. If she were to discover she'd once slept with this vile man, she'd just die. "Putting it all together now? And yes, we spent the night at the Valentine," said Kia Bourne. "Pretty nice place, expensive too. So you see, there's no need to look down your noses at me and accuse me of lying." There was a definite edge to his voice. "Because I haven't lied about anything at all." Dan had already said it, now it was Lily's turn. Icily, she reminded him. "Except Patsy didn't know who you were." "And that's where you're wrong again," said Kia Bourne. "You really shouldn't jump to conclusions. She knew." "How fucking dare you!" Dan's spine was rigid, his face closed with fury. "Don't believe me? Again?" Kia was enjoying himself now. "Go on then, ask her yourself."
End of CD 7. CD 8.
Chapter 36. It was called Facing the Music. Except there wasn't any music. Not that it would help if there were. This, Patsy knew, was the very worst time of her life, and all she could do now was endure it and suffer the consequences. She had known what was going on the moment her mobile had rung and Dan had said, "He's here, we're in the kitchen. Will you come over and join us?" And Dan, in turn, must have known at once that she knew, when she simply said yes without asking why. Now she was walking down the road in the direction of Goldstone House, about to explain why she had done something for which there was no excuse. How many times had she gone through it in her mind, desperately attempting to justify her decision? The years slid backwards all over again as Patsy relived the initial outrage when she discovered his true identity. Her disgust and fury had been visceral. He'd lied to her, seduced her with his charms and persuaded her to have sex with him because she believed he genuinely liked her. Yet again, needless to say, she'd been wrong. And then what was she supposed to do? It was snowing heavily outside. Her security-conscious mother, having double-locked and bolted the front door of the cottage, would be fast asleep in bed. If she walked home, she wouldn't be able to get in. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she could hardly start banging on other people's front doors either. Although now, of course, Patsy wished more than anything in the world that she had. Curling up on the bench next to the bus stop and spending the rest of the night getting covered in snow would have been so much better than staying in that room, in that huge velvet-canopied four-poster bed, with an adulterer whose name happened to be Kia Bourne. But finally, because there simply hadn't been a viable alternative, she had fallen into a miserable, guilt-racked, exhausted sleep. At 7 the next morning, she'd slid silently out of bed, washed and dressed herself while Kia Bourne slept on, then finally prodded him into wakefulness. When he turned and saw her standing there in her red coat, he said casually, "You off then?" "You need to leave here and never come back, I mean it." Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the straps of her handbag. "Never, ever. Lily doesn't want to know you. She's happy as she is. Coral and Nick are her parents now." "Fine. Suits me." As he said it, Kia smothered a yawn. Promise me you'll stay away. Is this about Lily, or about you? Both. Her armpits prickled with humiliation. It was shameful enough that she'd allowed herself to be picked up by a stranger and had ended up spending the night with him, let alone that he'd turned out to be Lily's father. You have to promise. Nobody's ever going to know you were here, and they must never find out about this. He was smiling, unconcerned. Us sleeping together, you mean? Patsy wanted to cry, but she couldn't allow it to happen. She wanted to peel off her own skin. She betrayed Lily and betrayed herself. She was a disgusting human being. I mean it, she told Kearborn, or I'll tell your wife. Not that she ever would have done, but he wasn't to know that. He'd hastily agreed with her and made the promise. The snow had stopped falling. A gritting lorry had already trundled past, and the road was now passable. Keir would leave the hotel, leave Stanton Langley, and she had his word he would never return. 12 years on, he'd broken that promise. Oh, God, she'd arrived at Goldstone House. Patsy braced herself. It was all about to go off. Lily knew the moment the kitchen door opened and she saw Patsy's face, white with terror rather than illness. Because, of course, Patsy hadn't been taken ill last night. She'd simply got the shock of her life. Well, she wasn't the only one. First Kearborn turning up, having sold his story to the paper, and now this. This. He says you spent the night together at the Valentine. Dan wasted no time in getting to the point. We did. Patsy was looking as if she wanted to be sick. And you knew who he was? Not at first, not for hours, not until after. Then you found out, Dan continued, but you still stayed there with him. Patsy opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. She nodded miserably. Even though you knew who he was, Dan went on, the disgust evident in his voice. I'm sorry. Patsy shook her head miserably. It was snowing and too late to come home, but I still shouldn't have stayed. See, said Kearborn, I told you I wasn't lying, and then she made me promise I'd never come back, never try to contact you again. Not for your benefit, he added, addressing Lily with an air of vindication. She just wanted to make sure her guilty secret was safe. Oh, God, said Lily. You knew he came here to see me. You knew he was interested enough to do that, to see how I was doing, but you never told me. You decided I didn't need to know. Still too ashamed to cry, Patsy said wretchedly, You must hate me. Lily stared at Patsy, and it was like looking into the eyes of a stranger. Oh well, seeing as everyone else was being honest all of a sudden, and seeing as she was feeling about as hurt and betrayed as it was physically possible to feel. Do I hate you? Right now? Honestly? All of a sudden she had to say it. Yes, I do. There was a moment of charged silence, then Patsy said, You can't hate me more than I hate myself. Dan watched as Patsy left the kitchen, stifling a sob as she closed the door behind her. Lily saw the faint smile on Kearborn's face. You're a pretty unpleasant human being, aren't you? She said. Do you still cheat on your wife? Her dark eyes blazed. Doesn't matter. I don't need to know. Anyway, I never want to see you again. You're nothing to me. Never have been, never will be. It was her turn to stand and walk out. And then there were two, said Dan. In case you're wondering, however much Lily despises you, I despise you more. Kearborn shrugged and said nothing. Seriously, why the fuck did you do this? You don't care about Lily, so what's the point? I needed the money. Oh, great. It's all right for people like you. You couldn't begin to understand. My marriage ended a few months ago. My wife kicked me out of the house. I'm living in a crappy bedsit. Not having enough money to enjoy yourself is depressing, said Keir. When I saw the photos of Lily in the paper and realised who she was, I was pleased she'd done well for herself. Then I happened to mention it to one of my mates down the pub, and he said I should call the newspaper, ask them how much they'd pay for a story. But I didn't, because I told myself I wasn't that kind of person. He stared down at the table for a couple of seconds. How did they find you then? By hiring Derren Brown? My mate called the paper and told them about me. Shaz turned up at the pub that same evening. She was very persuasive, said Kia. Once she has her mind set on something, it's hard to say no. He sighed. And she made me an offer I couldn't refuse. How much? Said Dan. $1,000. What? Are you serious? That's the offer you couldn't refuse? Again, when you don't have any spare cash, that's a lot. So you've come here and caused all this mess? Dan indicated the kitchen door through which first Patsy, then Lily had departed. For £1,000. Lily's your biological daughter and you've done this to her. Wow, you really are a hero. And I suppose you've never made any mistakes in your life, Kia retaliated. He was growing up, Dan realised. Maturing. A couple of years ago, he wouldn't have thought twice about launching himself at Kia Bourne, even in his currently crippled condition. He still had one good leg to stand on and one good arm capable of landing a punch that would demonstrate his utter contempt for this man and what he'd done. One perfect punch and bugger the consequences. But he wasn't going to give in to that urge, tempting though it was. The damage may already have been done here. However, there was something to be said for preventing possible future damage. Breaking Kia Bourne's jaw wouldn't be such a clever move. God, though, just for that split second, wouldn't it feel great? I'll better go and find Shaz, tell her what's going on, Kia Bourne said wearily. I don't suppose there's going to be any more photos I can use. Oh, the temptation. Don't get up, said Dan as the older man went to push back his chair. There is something else I need to say to you first. Patsy found Sean and Will sunbathing in their back garden, reading the Sunday papers and blissfully unaware of everything that had gone on. Well, they'd hear about it soon enough. Everyone would know by this time tomorrow. Stanton Langley might have plenty of good things for it, but keeping secrets wasn't one of them. I did a bad thing and now I'm running away for a bit. Sorry to mess you about. She handed the keys to the salon over to Will. Can you apologise to my regulars and say I'll be back next week? If they even wanted to let her do their hair after this. I've called Jenna and she's going to fill in while I'm away. Whoa, hold on, what's happened? Sean sat up and took off his sunglasses. What's this about? I'm a terrible person and now everyone knows about it. I need to go because I'm a coward and I just can't face anyone for a while. Ask Lily or Dan, they'll tell you what I did. Oh, Pat. There was concern in Sean's eyes, those kind grey eyes she'd encountered for the first time just a few short months after her tryst at the Valentine Hotel. She'd been so thrilled to meet Sean, had thought her luck had changed at last. Had even imagined that in some cosmic way she'd been forgiven for the shameful incident with Kia Bourne. Except, of course, the cosmos had been playing the long game and had had one last triumphant twist in store. Patsy was still trying hard not to cry. Sean said, Is it a man? Isn't it always? She could barely squeeze the words out past the lump in her throat. Oh, sweetheart. He wrapped his arms around her and gave her a consoling hug. Patsy let it happen because there would be no more hugs once he'd found out what she'd done. Not from anyone. Chapter 37. Arriving home on Friday afternoon, Declan found Gail already there, having let herself into the house in order to start preparing dinner. I finished work early. She gave him a brief kiss on the lips before turning back to attend to the salmon fillets and broccoli. Thought I'd surprise you. Battered cod and chips would have been the real surprise. Declan said, I just need to go upstairs to the office and check through a couple of contracts. He shrugged off his jacket and left his phone and car keys on the kitchen worktop. How long will he be? No more than 20 minutes. He put his hand to his heart, and that's a promise. Upstairs in his office, he kicked off his shoes, then waited a couple of minutes before making his way back down to the kitchen, where he found Gail going through his phone with the thoroughness of a KGB agent. So his instincts had been right after all. He stood in the doorway and watched as, head bent and fingers darting at the speed of light, she scrolled through his emails, instant messages, and recently called phone numbers. Utterly oblivious to his presence behind her, she jumped a mile when he said, What are you doing? The phone slid from her fingers and clattered onto the worktop. Ah, she'd moved on to photos. Reaching past her and scooping it up, Declan said, "Looking for anything in particular? Maybe I could help you find it." Caught out, Gail went on the attack. "You were on the phone to Lily this morning for 23 minutes. "I know. You've spoken to her 4 times this week. And she's had a lot going on, you know that." What with Keir Bourne's reappearance, followed by the Patsy bombshell, it had been a traumatic few days for Lily. Gail lifted her chin. "So you're still planning to drive down tomorrow and spend next week there?" "You know that too, I told you I was." "You can't stay at Goldstone House with Lily, you just can't." Shaking her head, Gail said, "Absolutely not." Declan was incredulous. "You can't seriously be thinking there's anything going on between Lily and me." "I don't think that, but other people might. And you can't tell me there isn't something suspicious going on. There was another number you rang this morning with the local code for Stanton Langley. Who was that?" "I don't know, maybe it was a plumber working at the cottage." "Except it was a landline number," Gail retorted. "You got off the phone to Lily and called it 2 minutes later." Declan nodded, remembering. "Yes, that was me calling Coral." "Ah, now we're getting to it. What about?" Only the fact that he'd already made his decision meant that Declan didn't mind answering the question. He said evenly, "Coral was wanting to cancel her trip to the south of France because she didn't want to leave Lily, what with everything that's happened. Lily asked me to speak to her to persuade her to go." "And did you?" "I did." It had actually been a confusing scenario, seeing that given the choice, he would have far preferred Coral to postpone the holiday so she'd still be at home while he was staying there. But he'd done as Lily wanted and assured Coral that he'd be around to keep an eye on things, because he knew from Lily how much the break in Grimoire would mean to Coral, and he'd eventually managed to make her see sense and agree to fly to Nice, even though it wasn't what he wanted. Oh well. "Interested in Coral, are you?" Gail said it lightly, but there was a faint edge to her voice. "No," said Declan. "Sure about that?" Jealousy had always been the ultimate turn-off for him. Luckily, years of bidding at auction had honed his poker face. He was skilled at not giving anything away. "Quite sure, thanks," he said calmly. "How long has the phone checking been going on?" "Not long." How had she even known the code to unlock it? By covertly watching him, Declan supposed, since it wasn't a number he'd ever written down. He thought back to the couple of occasions recently when he'd opened his office drawers upstairs and sensed that the contents weren't exactly as he'd left them. He gazed steadily at Gail. "Have you been going through the papers in my office too?" She hesitated just long enough, presumably wondering if he'd had CCTV installed, to confirm what he'd begun to suspect. He shook his head. "Okay, well, I think we've reached the end of the line here." Gail flushed. "What line?" "This." He indicated the two of them. "Us, I'm sorry, I can't cope with being spied on." "But I just had to—" "No, you didn't, and I never imagined you'd do it. I didn't think you were the type." "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Gail's voice rose. "That's just it, I'm not the type. I've never been like it before, but you forced me into it by being this way." "This way?" Declan shrugged. "What way?" "Oh, come on, you know, that place. Everything to do with Stanton Langley, that cottage you've bought, the people there, and if you ask me, I bet—" "Well, I'm not asking you." Declan cut in. "I don't want to know." He meant it too. Gail could be cutting when she wanted, and he couldn't bear to hear whatever dismissive comments she might be about to make. "This isn't working out. I think you should leave now." She blinked. "You mean it's over?" "We're over?" "That's what I mean, yes." "For real?" "For real." "What about this?" Gail pointed to the salmon fillets and broccoli sitting sadly in their white ceramic baking dish, along with a shallow puddle of rice wine vinegar and a smear of wasabi. Did anyone seriously like wasabi? "You can take it with you if you want," said Declan. Personally, for the next few months, he was planning on giving salmon and broccoli a miss. Gail gathered herself. "I'll go and get my things," she said coolly. She was only gone for a few minutes. It didn't take long to collect together her toothbrush, toiletries bag, and expensive silk nightdress. When she returned to the kitchen, she was in complete control once more. "I hope you're sure about this. You may live to regret it." "I may," Declan agreed, because she still had her pride. And then you'll be sorry, because if I leave now, that's it. No going back. Thank goodness for that. He shook his head. I know. OK, well, I'll be off then. Gale placed his spare front door key on the kitchen worktop. I dare say we can be civil about this. No need for any awkwardness. Relieved, Declan said. Definitely no need. Seeing as we know so many of the same people, said Gale, I hope we can let them think our decision to separate was mutual. Ah, back to keeping up appearances. Declan nodded gravely. Easier all round. Can I just ask you one last time? Is there anything going on between you and any of the women in Stanton Langley? Declan shook his head, and this time he was being entirely honest. While you were searching my phone, did you find anything? No, Gale admitted. That's because there's nothing to find. He spread his hands, and that's the honest truth. Right, okay, I believe you. Evidently relieved that she was leaving the relationship without having been cheated on, Gale nodded. I do. Thanks. Why was he even thanking her? He had no idea. She kissed him politely on both cheeks, as if they were distant acquaintances who'd bumped into each other in the street. I'll be off then. Just put foil on top, take it out after 20 minutes. Sorry? The mind boggled. What on earth was she talking about? The salmon and broccoli, said Gale. Oh, right, of course. Declan wondered how next door's cat would feel about wasabi. He showed Gale to the front door, extremely glad she hadn't sobbed. Just a word of warning, though, before I go. She paused in the doorway. There may be a few awkward moments ahead for you with Coral. The hairs rose on the back of Declan's neck. What? Just giving you a heads up. Gale regarded him with amusement. Why, I don't know what you mean. Have you seriously not noticed? She has a crush on you. A whoosh of adrenaline had him in its grip. At least his look of disbelief was genuine. Stunned, he swallowed. What makes you think that? Simple. Gale shrugged. I asked her. What? What? He raked his fingers through his hair. Are you serious? When? Last weekend, you know what I'm like, said Gale. If I want to know the answer to something, I'll ask the question. Or scroll through a phone. But the phone thing was irrelevant now. Hang on, you're telling me you asked Coral if she had a crush on me and she said yes? More amusement. Oh no, she said no. He stared at her. I don't get it, so she doesn't then. Declan, do keep up. I'm a woman, aren't I? She definitely does, I can tell. Declan continued to look stunned. See what I mean about awkward? But I thought you deserved to know so you can let her down gently. Forewarned is forearmed, after all. Right, Declan said slowly. Anyway, I'm off now, bye. Bye. Still in something of a daze, he heard himself say, Sorry. Evidently pleased with herself for having shared Coral's secret with him, Gale said smugly, No need. Your loss. Chapter 38. Declan left his house on Saturday morning, aiming to reach Stanton Langley by midday. He knew that Coral had booked a cab at 1 to take her to the airport. Obviously, he had no intention of saying anything about what Gale had told him, but just the thought of seeing Coral again before she left for France was enough to make his heart race with anticipation. He'd barely slept last night, going over and over in his head the words Gale had uttered. She'd been so completely sure of herself, too, and if her deduction was correct, well, that made all the difference in the world. Roadworks on the motorway meant one lane was closed. Traffic was heavy. It seemed as if half of London had decided to escape the city this morning and were all doing it at the same time. This was fine, though. Declan had anticipated the holiday exodus and factored the delay into his time schedule. Until a caravan got tangled with a lorry and ended up lying on its side across both remaining lanes, causing a 6-mile tailback and a fair amount of colourful language amongst those caught up in it. By the time Declan arrived in Stanton Langley and pulled up outside Goldstone House, it was 1:15. Hello! Lily greeted him with a hug. How are you? You just missed Coral. She left less than a minute ago, poor thing. She was starting to panic because her taxi was late turning up. You must have passed her at the end of the street. So the silver taxi he'd seen at the traffic lights had contained Coral. For a moment, Declan felt like a small child being told he'd just missed Father Christmas. Oh well, she'd be back in a week. It wouldn't kill him to wait, would it? Aloud, he said, "She'll have a great time over there." Lily beamed. "I know, it's going to do her the world of good. She used to love painting so much. I bet she'll have a fantastic week." Deliberately dismissing thoughts of Coral having a fantastic week in the south of France, Declan said, "And how are you doing?" "Not too bad. Keeping myself busy. Look, you don't need to sleep at Weaver's cottage. It's fine, I promise." He shook his head. They'd already discussed this on the phone. Gail had been right when she'd said other people might find the idea of him staying at Goldstone House inappropriate. "I really don't mind at all." Lily's eyes were sparkling. "Ah, but this is a whole new plan. Dan had a text from Patsy this morning saying she isn't going to be back for another week. So you can stay with Dan." "Patsy's away for another week, is she okay?" "I imagine so. I haven't rung her to ask, if that's what you're wondering." Lily's shrug was deliberately offhand. "We don't know where she is, but she's apparently spoken to Jenna, who's staying on to cover for her at the salon." She paused, then changed the subject. "So anyway, how about that for an idea? You and Dan at his place?" It would certainly be more comfortable than sleeping on the floor at Weaver's cottage. "How does Dan feel about it?" "Hey, he's the injured party who can't carry a cup of tea out of the kitchen without tipping it over himself like Mr. Bean." Good humour restored, Lily said. "It was Dan's idea." "In that case, perfect," said Declan. "Hooray!" She hugged him again. "Oh, I'm so glad you're back." The piece in this Sunday's edition of the newspaper appeared online just before midnight. It was far smaller than last week's double-page spread. Dan swung his laptop round so they could view the screen, and Lily and Declan leaned across the table to read the article. Lily, who had been bracing herself all evening, all week if she were being honest, saw that it was essentially a non-story. Having scanned Kia Bourne's words, she felt the tension seep out of her body. All the pent-up anxiety magically recede. "Oh, thank God, I thought he was going to say all sorts of horrible things." She took a glug of Dan's wine because her own glass was empty. "But he hasn't bad-mouthed me at all." Now that he hadn't, she almost felt guilty for having thought he might. "Well, what would that have made him look like? Anyway," Declan raised his own glass to her. "Good news, here's to you." "Cheers." Lily clinked and took another glug. "I'd say cheers too," Dan said mournfully. "But someone stole my drink." Lily studied the photos accompanying the article more carefully. The first, of the reunion itself, looked every bit as uncomfortable as it had felt. Two strangers awkwardly encountering each other in the street. The second, presumably taken afterwards, showed Kia Bourne looking sad, and the accompanying text quoted him as saying, "It wasn't the outcome I was hoping for, but I respect Lily's decision not to want any further contact with me. There's nothing more to be done. I just wish her and Eddie Tesla all the very best for the future." The third and final photograph was of Kia Bourne's ex-wife and teenage daughter, neither of whom spoke to him any longer. The ex-wife Tanya had told Shaz, "You want my honest opinion? Sure about that? Okay, Kia Bourne was a lousy husband and father who was capable of turning on the charm when it suited him. He had several affairs that I knew of, and I'm sure there were plenty more I never got to hear about. Our lives are far happier now without him around to mess us about, and I don't blame Lily one bit for not wanting anything to do with him. That kind of hassle has to be the last thing she'd need." The daughter, Sasha, was equally blunt. She said, "Lily's well off out of it. Trust me, she hasn't missed out on anything, not having our father in her life. I'm 15 years old, and last Christmas he gave me a teddy bear he'd bought in a petrol station on Christmas Eve. I know this because he left the receipt in the plastic bag it was wrapped up in." Finally, asked if she was curious to meet her older half-sister, the girl had replied, "To be truthful, I'm not bothered. I mean, Lily's pretty and everything, but the two of us don't look anything alike. Seeing photos of her doesn't make me long to meet her just because we happen to have the same biological father, especially when we both wish we didn't. Still, she seems like a nice person, so good luck to her. And if she happens to read this, here's a message from me. Hi, Lily, you had a lucky escape." Lily finished reading. That poor girl. She sounds great, though. Dan smiled. "She sounds exactly like you." She hadn't even realised it, but of course he was right. Studying the photograph more closely, Lily saw the clean angles of Sasha's face, the bright, defiant gleam in her blue eyes and the determined tilt of her chin. She was small and pale, with poker-straight dark hair. There might not be any physical similarity between them, but Sasha's comments were undoubtedly the kind she herself would have made at that age. "Good for her," she said with affectionate empathy. "She'll be fine." "You could contact her if you want to," said Declan. "Write a letter, tell her you'd like to meet up." But Lily was already shaking her head. "It's okay, she's not interested. You can't force these things. She knows where I am if she changes her mind. And there's no hurry. Maybe she'll be in touch a year from now or 10 years. She's only 15, let her do it in her own time." Declan walked Lily back to Goldstone House, then returned to the cottage and helped Dan clear away the dishes on the living room table. "Thanks for offering to put me up," he said as Dan poured them both a nightcap. "No problem, it's good to have you here." Dan raised his tumbler of scotch. "You haven't mentioned Gail all evening. Is she going to be coming down any time this week?" Declan paused. He hadn't told Lily his relationship with Gail was over, but that was at least partly because he hadn't wanted to detract from Lily's own current issues. He shook his head. "She's not coming down. We've called it a day." "You have?" Dan was interested. "Why?" Well, he wasn't going to tell him that. Declan shrugged. "Just wasn't working out. You know when it's right." "And it wasn't right," Dan concluded with a nod. "Same with me and Anna." "I haven't told Lily. She's got enough to think about at the moment." The other, somewhat less altruistic reason was to do with him wanting to be the one who told Coral so he could see her reaction face to face. "Fine, it's just between us." As Declan began filling the bowl with hot water and fairy, Dan said, "I'm not great at washing up, but I can put stuff away." "No problem, I'll do this bit. Can you pass me those plates?" Limping across the kitchen, Dan carried the plates over with his good hand and Declan plunged them into the bowl. "We're like Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in The Odd Couple," Dan grinned. "Two single men living together. Can I be Walter Matthau?" "Definitely." Unable to resist asking, Declan rinsed a plate and said, "What caused the split between you and Anna then?" Not that he'd ever met her himself, but Lily had told him all about Dan's revolving door attitude towards dating the opposite sex. Dan glanced at him, then shrugged and looked away. "Like I said, pretty much the same as you. When I was younger, I'd just go out with whoever I liked because they were easy enough to spend a bit of time with. But I'm getting older now and it needs to be more than that. It needs to mean more. If they aren't someone you know you definitely want to spend the rest of your life with, well, it just seems kind of pointless." From the look on his face, Declan guessed that Dan had surprised himself with this confession. At a guess, it wasn't the kind of thing he'd find easy to admit to work colleagues and friends his own age. "I think you're probably right. Good for you." Declan nodded easily. "It'll happen one day. How about Lily?" he continued, changing the subject to what had been uppermost in his own mind tonight. "What do you think's going to happen when Patsy comes back? Do you suppose they'll be able to sort themselves out?" When there was no reply, he turned to look at Dan and saw how very much it evidently mattered to him. There was heightened colour in his tanned cheeks and tension visible in his jaw. Finally, he exhaled and said, "Bloody hell, I hope so. But I really don't know." Chapter 39. "Hey, how are you?" Lily experienced a fresh pang of guilt at the sound of Eddie's voice. I'm fine, but a bit, Let me guess, busy." His response was good-natured but resigned, which was hardly surprising, seeing as this was the third time today he'd called her and she'd been unable to speak to him. "I'm sorry, it's just been chaos here. I've been rushed off my feet, and there are people queuing up now. Can I call you back later?" "You said that 3 hours ago." "I know, we haven't stopped for a minute. Look, I'll definitely call you at 6 o'clock. "Fine," said Eddie. "Let's hope I'll be free then." "Sorry." Lily lifted her hair away from where it was stuck to the back of her neck. "It's okay, I know what it's like." "Excuse me," snapped a tall woman, clutching 2 cast-iron door knockers and a handful of doorknobs. "Could I possibly buy these, or shall I just put them in my handbag and leave?" "I have to go," Lily told Eddie. "Don't work too hard," he said in the moment before she hung up. Chic. At 5:30, Lily closed the yard for the day. Once she'd locked up the office and said goodbye to Marty, she headed over to the house, where she found Dan waiting for her on the doorstep. He grinned at her. "Hi, looking hot?" In a fabulous way or a sweaty way? Since her hair was once again plastered against her neck and her t-shirt was dusty and damp, Lily suspected she knew which. "Start fishing for compliments, you." "What's that?" She pointed to the cool box at his feet. "It's an ambulance." "Hardy-ha. I mean, what's in it?" Change of plan. Having earlier volunteered to cook dinner at the cottage for the three of them, Dan picked up the cool box and followed her into the house. "Declan's staying on at Weaver's cottage to get the kitchen finished before the worktops arrive tomorrow. He won't be back before midnight, so I thought I'd take you somewhere special instead." He gestured with pride at the cool box. "I've done us a picnic." "Nice. And how are you planning on taking me there exactly? By giving me a piggyback?" "You'll have to drive us," said Dan, as if she hadn't guessed. "Where are we going then?" "Back in time." His dark eyes glittered with mischief. "Don't ask. You'll like it, though, I promise." "Give me half an hour." She kicked off her flip-flops and headed for the staircase. "I need to shower and change first." Under the stream of lukewarm water, Lily massaged her aching temples and let the shampoo suds cascade over her face. It had been a long week. She'd been working hard, keeping herself busy in order not to have to think about Patsy. The weather had grown steadily warmer, and today the sun had blazed down, turning the yard into a complete heat trap. Dressed once more, this time in a purple cotton sundress, she threw herself onto the bed and called Eddie in New Zealand. "Hi," he said when he answered. "Sorry, it's my turn to be busy now." Lily's heart sank. "Oh no, that's a—" "Joking." This time she had the smile in his voice. "I'm fine to talk. How are you doing?" "Shattered. Did I wake you up?" "It's okay, I couldn't sleep anyway. The joys of jet lag. How's Declan getting along with the cottage?" "Oh, he's been working on it non-stop. They're going to finish installing the kitchen tonight." "How about you? What do you have planned for today?" "Interviews. We're recording a chat show first, then there's a 4-hour press junket this afternoon." Lily said teasingly. "And are there any gorgeous females out there?" "I wouldn't notice. How about you, any irresistible male customers?" "God, loads." He laughed. "I miss you." "Miss you too." He was currently on a tour of New Zealand, Australia and Singapore, and from there he had to fly back to New York. They wouldn't see each other again until the week after next. "Sorry about today." "Don't worry, it can't be helped. Goes with the territory." His voice softened. "We'll make up for it when I get back." Lily wiggled her toes and smiled up at the ceiling. "Yes, we will." "You said 30 minutes, you're late," said Dan when Lily reappeared. He made himself look disapproving, but the sight of her caused his heart to leap. She was wearing a short purple dress, silver flip-flops and his favourite scent. Lily said, "I was talking to Eddie," which didn't make his heart leap, but he was used to putting on a brave front. Reaching for the cool box, cleverly he'd worked out how to loop the handle over the grippy part of the aluminium crutch. He said, "Come along then, let's go." "Bossy," Lily gave him a nudge. "Hungry," said Dan as they made their way over to the car. 20 minutes later, she realised where they were headed. "Are we going to the Leap?" "It's possible." Dan grinned at her. "Go on then, you know the way." They'd almost reached Hestercombe, a village to the west of Stanton Langley. Lily duly turned left and drove along the narrow farm track. "Oh my God, I can't believe we're back here," she marvelled. "I haven't thought about this place for so long. Remember that summer? What if there's still a bull in the field? If there is, I'm not risking it." She raised her eyebrows at Dan's still plastered foot. "And you definitely can't." "There's no bull, I checked." 2 days ago, in a taxi on his way to a physiotherapy appointment in Cheltenham, he'd spotted the turn-off and asked the driver to make a quick detour down the track. The bull was long gone, the field currently empty. Thank God. At the end of the overgrown track, Lily parked on the verge. Hauling the cool box out of the boot of the car, she opened the gate to allow Dan through, then closed it behind them. "This is exciting." She grinned at him as he limped beside her along the perimeter of the field. "I thought you'd like it." Dan was pleased with his idea to bring her here. "You deserve a break after the week you've had." He was still slow, Though getting better at moving along as the broken bone in his foot had begun to heal, it took them 10 minutes to make their way in single file along the stony path that led down through the woods to the water's edge. The trees thinned out, dried grass stalks whipped their legs as they approached their destination, and they finally reached the sun-dappled grassy clearing with Hestercombe Lake stretching out directly in front of them. "Wow," said Lily. "I know." Dan stood beside her, and together they surveyed the magical view. The sky was pale cobalt, the water reflecting it a pewter-tinted shade of blue. On the other side of the lake stood the picturesque village of Hestercombe. There were holiday homes visible amongst the trees and a small artificial beach that had been constructed by the owner of Hestercombe House. They could see several people on the beach, a couple more were swimming and splashing around, and birds were darting and swooping through the still summer air. That was the popular side of the lake, close to a road and easily accessible to all. This side was the better one, though. It was the secret side most people would have no idea how to reach. A group of them from school had discovered it one chilly day during the Easter holidays and made it their own. As summer had approached and the days had grown longer and warmer, they'd taken to cycling over here most weekends, hanging out together, playing music, drinking illicit bottles of cider, and inventing games to entertain themselves. Once the summer holidays had arrived, it had practically become a home from home. "Nothing's changed, it's exactly the same," Lily marvelled. She put the cool box down on the grassy bank, opened it and shook out the thin blanket. Once the food had been arranged to her liking, they sat down and Dan unscrewed the cap on the bottle of wine he'd packed, along with 2 acrylic tumblers. "Here you go, you can have 1 glass." He poured and handed the first one to Lily. "Cheers," she said when his tumbler was filled too. "This is a luxury we didn't have back then. Posh wine in glasses." Dan grinned. "We used to take turns swigging Blackthorn cider out of a plastic bottle." "I always was a classy bird." Lily tossed a cherry tomato high into the air, caught it in her mouth and crunched it in half with her teeth. "See, you still are." "I know. Sophisticated me." She clapped a hand to her chest. "Through and through." God, he loved her so much. For a moment, Dan found himself winded, unable to speak. He really did love everything about her, from her dancing brown eyes to the way those spirals of tawny blonde hair bounced over her smooth, tanned shoulders, to her unfailing ability to laugh at herself. He leaned back with his legs stretched out in front of him and watched the surface of the water shimmer as iridescent dragonflies hovered and danced over it, inches above the surface. He could so clearly remember the time Lily had been floating on her back in the water with her eyes closed, and he'd swum silently up behind her. Just as he'd been about to surprise her, a huge dragonfly had darted in front of his face so suddenly that he let out a yell and tried to bat it away in a panic like a complete wuss. Lily, in hysterics of laughter, had never let him forget it. Ever since, during quiet moments, it had become something of a standing joke to blurt out, "Dragonfly, wah!" Now, idly nudging his leg with her bare foot, she pointed half a Scotch egg at the dancing dragonflies and said, "Do you remember that time you—" "Yes, I do." He rolled his eyes. "Thank you so much for reminding me." "Ha, that was hilarious." Lily flailed her arms, miming his abject horror. "You were such a big girl's blouse." "So you've told me 300 or 400 times." She laughed. "Some things improve with repetition." "Oh my God, look, I can't believe it's still there." Lily was lying on her back now, pointing up into the branches of the huge sycamore tree behind them. Following the direction of her index finger, Dan saw the remains of the old grey rope fastened around one of the thicker branches overhead. Once it had been 5 meters long, now only a short length with tattered ends remained. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. Dan was rueful. It had been his idea after all. "Oh, come on, it was a brilliant idea." Lily turned her head sideways to look at him. "What happened to Kyle wasn't your fault, was it?" Chapter 40. Wasn't it? Dan's mouth was dry. Apart from anything else, he'd been the one who had bought the rope from the hardware store, carried it all the way down here and climbed the tree in order to tie it securely around that branch. He'd done it so they could take a running jump from the top of the slope, swing out over the water like Tarzan, then launch themselves through the air and into the lake. He'd gone first to test it out, and everyone else had followed his lead. It had been the highlight of that long, hot summer, providing countless hours of fun and resulting in their meeting place being renamed The Leap. They would have carried on doing it too, if Kyle hadn't had his accident, making a catastrophic error whilst attempting that double somersault. Instead of releasing his grip on the outward swing, Kyle had held on too long and let go on the return one, but had gone for the double somersault anyway. Everyone had seen him cartwheel through the air, then land on the very edge of the lake in less than 3 inches of water. The sound of him landing, it had been a hideous combination of watery splash and bone-crunching thud, was something Dan knew he'd never forget. "It was an accident," said Lily. "Poor Kyle, scary at the time, though." It had been bloody scary. Kyle had lain there on his side, white-faced and clearly in tremendous pain. It had taken 25 minutes for the paramedics to locate and reach them, but it had seemed like hours. Dan had knelt in the water beside him the whole time, not daring to move Kyle's crumpled body. Instead, he'd kept the injured boy's head slightly elevated so the water didn't flow into his mouth. Once the paramedics had arrived, they'd strapped Kyle onto a stretcher and with some difficulty managed to carry him back up the hill to the waiting ambulance. The next day, the rest of them discovered he'd sustained multiple fractures to his pelvis. Kyle had spent the next couple of weeks in Cheltenham General Hospital and the remainder of that summer recuperating. His parents had then relocated to somewhere in the north of England, so he never did return to their school and none of them ever heard from him again. "I wonder what he's doing now," Lily mused. She pulled a face. "Oh, I wonder if he made a full recovery." "Of course he did. You don't know that. He might be hobbling around on sticks, or in a wheelchair." "Don't say that." Dan felt sick. "He could be, though," said Lily. "We just don't know." "Poor Kyle, he was a funny little thing, wasn't he? Always so desperate to fit in with the rest of us, but he never really did. God, and his mother was scary. When did you ever meet his mother?" Kyle had only arrived at the school 6 months earlier and had lived several miles from Stanton Langley in a village called Compton Drew. As far as Dan was aware, none of them had ever encountered his parents. Lily reached over for the punnet of raspberries, then lay back and rested them on her flat stomach. "It's a secret." He turned his head to look at her. "What?" She popped a raspberry into her mouth. "Okay, it was a secret. I'm sure he won't mind me telling you now. He invited me over for tea at his house one day." "He did?" Dan paused. "Is that the secret? Are you sure you want to work for MI5? "Sarcastic." Lily gave his ankle a gentle kick. "He asked me to pretend to be his girlfriend, if you must know." "Seriously, why?" His mother had been giving him a hard time, wanting to know why he wasn't going out with anyone. Poor Kyle. When he told me, I couldn't believe she'd be like that. Then I met her and she was worse. The first thing she said to me was, "So you're Kyle's girlfriend? Thank goodness for that, we were beginning to think he was gay." Ouch, what a witch. And she actually meant it, Dan said in disbelief. Oh, definitely, she was a horrible woman. Now he felt even worse. That poor kid. And presumably he was gay. Nope, he said not. He told me he was straight but shy. And he was only 16, for crying out loud. Can you imagine how awful it must have been having your mother coming out with stuff like that? So you just went over to his house for tea and that was it? She was convinced? I went over there 4 or 5 times. His mother ended up really liking me. But there was never anything going on between you and Kyle? Of course not. We just held hands a bit and pretended to be boyfriend and girlfriend for a few weeks. Then we broke up. I can't believe you did all that, said Dan. Lily shrugged. No big deal, I felt sorry for him, so I helped him out. You're actually quite a nice person deep down. And you're actually in danger of getting rolled into the water, Lily nudged him playfully. I'm amazed you never mentioned it before. All these years and you kept it to yourself. Maybe because it was no one else's business. And if you'd found out, you'd probably have made fun of him. Dan smiled. He loved that Lily had resisted the temptation to tell a story that would have been amusing and shown her in a good light. She was also right about the making fun of Kyle bit. Well, prior to the accident, at least. They both gazed out over the lake in companionable silence for a couple of minutes. Following that day, the farmer who owned the land above this side of the lake had put up a no-entry sign and rather more persuasively, installed a bull in the field. He'd evidently also cut down the rope hanging from the tree. Since then, none of them had been back. Until today. "Oh, Coral called earlier," said Lily. "It was lovely to hear her sounding so happy. She's having a fantastic time in Clumo." "That's great. I'm so glad we managed to persuade her to go, and she's painting again. What are you looking at?" Dan smiled. "You?" Whilst she'd been gazing up at the sky, he'd thought it was safe to study her profile in the early evening sunlight, the angle of her cheekbones, the dusting of freckles across her nose, the sweep of her gold-tipped lashes above the clear whites of her eyes. "Why? Do I have something on my face?" She rubbed her hand vigorously around her mouth. "Is it crumbs?" "It's okay, you're fine." It wasn't something he could say out loud, but Lily's mouth really was his favourite mouth in the world. "Have you heard from Patsy?" She was still watching the sun filtering through the branches. Her hair was spread out across the grass beneath her head, and a ladybird had just landed on her pink bra strap. Was it a good sign that she had asked? "I had a text this afternoon. She asked me if I thought you missed her." Silence. Dan realised she must miss Patsy, but couldn't bring herself to admit it. After a few moments, he said, "She also asked me if I thought you'd ever speak to her again." Lily swallowed. "And what did you say?" "I told her I didn't know. I thought I might ask you this evening." What does mean?" "Honestly," she sighed. "Oh, Dan, you know me. I'm not the not speaking to someone type. But I still can't believe she did it. All these years she didn't tell me he'd been here. She had no right to keep something like that to herself. If she hadn't slept with him, she'd have told me, I know she would. But she needed to cover her tracks, so she kept quiet. Every time I think about it, I just feel..." Lily clenched her fist and pressed it against her chest. "It makes me feel sick." "I know." "I can't help it. She did a bad thing." Dan nodded. "Have you ever done a bad thing?" "Of course I've done bad things, but not that bad," said Lily. "Nowhere near." "Go on then. Tell me some of your not-so-bad things." "Okay." A glimmer of a smile. "Well, I made you some cheese on toast once. I dropped it face down on the kitchen floor and there wasn't any more bread left. So I scooped it up, smoothed all the melted cheese back over the top with a knife and sprinkled it with black pepper so you couldn't tell anything had happened." "Did you also spit on it?" "What? No." "In that case," said Dan, "I forgive you." He wouldn't have minded even if she had. "Thanks, I feel so much better now." Lily shot him a sideways look. "Is this your attempt to make everything all right? Because I don't think it's going to work." "Come on, is that the worst thing you've ever done? I mean, seriously." "Right, I'm trying to remember." She concentrated hard, then said, "Okay, I bought 2 cushions in a supermarket once, and the cashier made a mistake and only charged me for one of them. I should have told her, but I didn't." "Oh my God, I bet you feel really terrible about that," said Dan. "I did." "Oh." She realised he was making fun of her. "Shut up, I did feel bad about it." "Now tell me the very worst thing you've ever done. And please don't say it was the time you put an empty crisp packet in the green recycling bin." Lily reached out and pinched his wrist, then gave the matter some thought. Finally, she said, "Just after I'd passed my driving test, I reversed the van into a postbox and smashed the brake light. I swore blind to Coral and Nick that I'd seen a red car reverse into the van, then drive off." "And did they ever find out the truth?" "No. So I could tell Coral when she gets back from France." Lily gave him a look. "You could, but it's hardly a life changer, is it? Is that why you're doing this?" Dan wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. He was kind of freestyling, making it up as he went along. "Your bad things aren't bad enough." He topped up his glass of wine. "You've never even told a string of lies and broken some guy's heart. Apart from mine, which doesn't count." "Sorry," said Lily. "If only I had a secret double life as a serial killer. Go on then, what's the most awful thing you've done?" Dan tilted his head to look at her. This was the bit he had decided to tell her. "Oh dear," Lily's eyes were bright with anticipation. Too many to choose from, I suppose. Hard to narrow them down. It was my fault that Kyle smashed his pelvis. Now it was Dan's turn to feel a bit sick. He'd actually said it out loud. At last. Chapter 41. What? No, it wasn't. I was there, said Lily. I saw it. He got his timing wrong, that's all. OK, time for some brutal honesty. Aware that his was a story that decidedly didn't paint him in a good light, Dan took a deep breath. Kyle got his timing wrong because he was terrified. I told him he had to go for the double somersault, and if he didn't do it, we didn't want him tagging along with us anymore. I said if he wimped out, that was it. He'd be out of the group. And I saw the look on his face. I knew he was petrified, but I let him go ahead and try it anyway. He paused. So that's why it happened, and it was all my fault. Wow. Lily was staring at him, incredulous. Why? Why did you say that to him? Oh, the crawling shame. Not just of having done it, but of revealing his own behaviour to Lily. I don't know. I guess I just didn't like him that much. He was quiet and awkward, and I used to catch him looking at me. He used to watch you too all the time. It creeped me out a bit. It had actually creeped him out a lot. I suppose I thought it would either force him to go ahead and do it and make him more interesting, or get him to leave our group, which most of us would have been happy about. Lily was frowning. But I never heard you say anything mean to him. I didn't. Apart from that day. I just came out with the challenge on the way down there and wondered what he'd do. I actually thought he'd chicken out. Dan shook his head. Obviously, I wasn't expecting it to end the way it did. And Kyle never said anything. I visited him in hospital and he never told me. He didn't say a word to anyone. Dan agreed. I knew it was my fault. He knew it was my fault. And I felt guilty about it ever since. Poor Kyle. I wonder what happened to him. I know, I've thought about that too. As bad things go, that's a pretty good one, though, said Lily. Thanks. I haven't done anything like that. Clearly not. If you had, it might make it easier for you to understand how it feels. OK, see that little bit of rope dangling up there? Climb up and swing from it, said Lily. Then let go and land on those rocks. I'm ordering you to do it. You're joking, Dan told her, but I'm serious. I think you should do something you'd feel guilty about. Lily bit into a ripe strawberry and thought for a moment. Don't make me go shoplifting, I won't do it. God, imagine getting arrested. Hang on, you've got a... Dan stopped himself as the thought struck him. He'd been about to tell her the ladybird was now tight-walking its way along her narrow pink bra strap. Stunned, he let this new thought rattle and swoop through his brain like a micro roller coaster. OK, this was something he genuinely hadn't planned in advance, but would Lily believe him? And should he do it? More to the point, did he dare to do it? And if he did, what would it do to him? I've got a what? Lily was still waiting for him to finish the original sentence. She peered down at her front, then wiped the corners of her mouth once more. Here, let me. Sliding closer and half sitting up so the arm he'd been supporting himself on was now free, Dan carefully coaxed the ladybird off the satin strap with his thumb and nudged it into the palm of his hand. Oh no, you can't be serious. Lily was shaking her head. I'm not killing a ladybird. Don't ask me to do that. Despite himself, Dan started to laugh. The way her mind worked never failed to entertain him. I'm not asking you to murder a ladybird. Oh, well, good. As if it had had quite enough of this kind of dangerous talk, the ladybird spread its wings and flew off. And now Dan was no longer laughing. His heart was bumping crazily against his ribcage at the prospect of what he was about to do. He'd known Lily long enough and well enough to know for sure that she'd never been unfaithful to her boyfriend. For a start, there hadn't been that many of them. Secondly, it simply wasn't in her nature to be underhand. It would never occur to her to even be tempted. OK, said Lily, what are you thinking? She was still lying on her back with her hair spread across the grass beneath her head. Dan sat at her side, gazing down and breathing in the faint, fresh scent of her shampoo.
End of CD 8.